A very good morning to you and welcome to the St. Lucia House of Assembly and to the sitting of the House today, Tuesday, March 7th. A number of papers to be laid by the Prime Minister and Minister of Finance, Economic Development, Youth Economy, Justice and National Security, by the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Tourism, Investment, Creative Industries, Culture and Information, by the Minister of Education, Sustainable Development, Innovation, Science, Technology and Vocational Training, by the Minister of Commerce, Manufacturing, Business Development. The motions to be laid here today by the Prime Minister and Minister for Finance, Economic Development, Youth Economy, Justice and National Security, where he will be asking for authorization to guarantee an overdraft facility in the amount of EC $3,500,000 from the Republic Bank, Eastern Caribbean Limited, to the St. Jude Hospital for the purpose of assisting with working capital requirements. The motion says, be it further resolved that the repayment of the advances are on demand. The interest is payable monthly at the bank's base lending rate from time to time, less 4% per annum, with a present effective rate of 6% per annum, and a commitment fee of $5,000 repayable on acceptance of the commitment letter. And we have one bill, and that bill is the Constitution Amendment number 2, and it is the intention of the House to seek leave of the House to enable the bill to go through all its stages at this sitting. And that bill is a very important one, which will be discussed here today, and it's all about the position of the Deputy Speaker. I'll come back to that, because with me, as usual, is Mr. Michael Gaspar.
Merci un peu Winston, avec bienvenue, bonjour Sainte-Lucie, bonjour tout le monde avec bienvenue pour session Kai Concite qui tient pour aujourd'hui. Ça c'est 7 mars l'année 2023. Peut-être qu'on a échangé, nous étions ici à mardi passé pour en l'autre occasion. Ça fait 6 jours à côté Sainte-Lucie. Vous mettez à changer la constitution pour changer, sortir l'audience. Ça c'est l'audience appelle l'Angleterre pour l'audience appelle Kawaii Blanc même. Ça nous a créé 6 jours. Ça a passé en cas de et puis c'est là la semaine passée. Bien aujourd'hui, en l'autre session qui a côté, il y a aussi discuter en l'autre sujet qui a fait et puis ça fait constitution pays en l'autre changement qui a fait en constitution pour ça là c'est ça fait deputy speaker comme Winston d'où il y a plus de détails mais ça il a essayé de faire aujourd'hui c'est peut-être un changement qui a changé en dernier gouvernement en bas UWP, c'est le Premier ministre Alan Chastanet, il y a un pays qui est resté sans deputy speaker. Avec ça, on dit dans la constitution pays, avec ça a allé, ça a fait un chai des agréments. Et bien, ça le gouvernement a fait aujourd'hui, il a passé loi ça là, il a changé la constitution pour faire plus à l'aise, pour la situation c'est là pas faite encore. À part de ça, là aussi en l'autre bill il y a dit credit reporting avec attention gouvernement c'est pour passer entièrement en tous les 3 différents stages et bien pas aussi comme Winston dit tout à l'heure l'autre motion qui a discuté c'est pour gouvernement ça c'est ministre qui est responsable pour finance avec développement économique affaires économie jeunesse et justice et puis sécurité nationale en Europe c'est premier ministre il a passé en motion pour prêter $3,500 excusez-moi c'est 3,500,000 $000, c'est ça. Je me dis encore, c'est 3 500 000 $. Ils ont prêté avec Bank Republic, ça c'est Eastern Caribbean, avec c'est pour indéfinir l'hôpital Saint-Jude. Moi, ça, en Chaïmouni, l'hôpital Saint-Jude, j'ai discuté, ça c'est un sujet, Premier ministre même, et puis le gouvernement, j'ai continuellement parlé à cette situation Saint-Jude, et puis il a fait pour mettre qui, il a continué à travailler à ce. Eh bien, aujourd'hui, le gouvernement a prêté l'argent là pour essayer faire travail, à continuer à travailler à sous l'hôpital Saint-Jude. Winston?
Well, a little background to the Deputy Speaker situation. It was a marathon session of the St. Lucia House of Assembly, dramatically ending late in the evening on Tuesday, October 31st, 2017, with the illness and hospitalization of the Speaker of the House, then Leon Theodore John. Her unfortunate sickness not only highlighted the truth of the Calypsonian Penguins' refrain that a deputy is essential, but also underlined once again the necessity for constitutional reform in St. Lucia. The House of Assembly could not conclude its business that evening, and for another month because of the absence of a deputy speaker to continue in place of the ill Mrs. Theodore John. For after 16 months into a new session of Parliament, following the June 6, 2017 elections, the House of Assembly was incredibly functioning without a deputy speaker. That is what we are here to do today, to correct that situation and make sure this never happens again. Well, the root of this anonymous situation is that the new Prime Minister, Alan Chasney at the time, informing his cabinet in 2016, appointed all the other 10 parliamentary representatives of his United Workers' Party as government ministers. By so doing, he broke the convention observed since independence in 1979 that the government party, or governing party, I beg your pardon, always provides the nominee for the position of Deputy Speaker. The only exception to this occurred at independence in February of 1979, when then Prime Minister John Compton, to promote national unity on the occasion of granting independence, requested that the opposition St. Lucia Labour Party hold the Deputy Speaker spot in the new Parliament. With just a few months left before a general election, the SLP agreed, and Kenneth Foster, the late Kenneth Foster, became Deputy Speaker to then Speaker Wilfred Sinclair Daniel. Mr. Daniel is a founding member of the United Workers' Party that merged with the Labour Party of John Compton. Mr. Mallet was a PPP, People's Progressive Party, so the United Workers' Party is a combination of the PPP and John Compton's then Labour movement. So Foster agreed to become Deputy Speaker to Wilfred Sinclair Daniel. Since then, the Deputy Speakers and their political parties from June 1979 have been from 79 to 82, Cecil Lay of the St. Lucia Labour Party, and Alan Louisi was then the Prime Minister. From 1982 to 1987, Eldridge Stevens of the United Workers' Party, led by Prime Minister John Compton. From 87 to 92, Alan Bousquet of the government of Prime Minister John Compton. From 92 to 97, Alan Bousquet again. from the Compton administration. From 1997 to 2006, Cecil Lay, the government of the St. Lucia Labour Party of Dr. Kenny Anthony. From 2006 to 2011, Marcus Nicholas, from the government of John Compton, and then Prime Minister Stephenson King. From 2011 to 2016, the Honorable Desmond Long of the St. Lucia Labour Party of Prime Minister Kenny Anthony. Michael, you want to take it from there?
Oui, Winston, nous avons un chai l'histoire là, un chai camouché côté exactement en bas il sorti, puisque quand Winston dit nous, c'est en situation côté depuis l'indépendance, Saint-Lucie toujours gagné un deputy speaker, un assistant pour speaker, pour si un cas speaker malade, et bien peut-être en l'occasion qui en est peut-être il passe à faire cela, ça était toujours là. Il pas en dedans, il en dedans loi, enfin constitution, mais mes derniers gouvernements décidé qu'il partait ça continuer à quoi dire il partait obligé faire avec Winston. Ben nous en chaque détail sous ces différents speakers, ces différents deputy speakers qui tiennent position ça là avec tes mains garder ça réfléchir à ce évitement. C'est mon en 1980, ça c'est 79, les Saint-Lucie venu indépendant pour arriver 1982. Deputy speaker c'était honorable Cecil Lay à sous façade SLP. Aussi nous tenions en 1982 pour 1987. Deputy speaker c'était Eldred Stevens à sous façade UWP avec premier ministre en temps ça là c'était défunt John Compton, c'est John Compton. 1987 pour 1992. Deputy Speaker, c'était honorable Alan Bousquet à sous façade UWP avec ça c'était un bas gouvernement et bien Premier ministre John Compton, c'est John Compton avec en 1992 pour 1997. C'est Deputy Speaker sous c'était honorable Alan Bousquet, défunt Alan Bousquet à sous façade UWP. En temps ça là encore c'était gouvernement c'est John Compton qui était conduit avec 1997 pour 1900 ça c'est 2006 honorable Cecil Lay à sous façade UWP, c'est lui qui était deputy speaker en bas conduite Dr. Kenny Anthony. Après ça nous tenions 2006 pour 2011 Marcus Nicholas en façade UWP, il était deputy speaker en bas conduite premier ministre c'est John Compton avec aussi honorable Stephenson King dans ça là avec 2011 pour 2016 Desmond Long, ça c'est nous avons créé Mighty Pep, changé était représenter Lance Lawe et Kanawi en bas façade à sous façade SLP, il c'était deputy speaker avec un premier ministre dans ça là c'était honorable Dr. Kenny Anthony avec après ça qui est-ce qui était après ça OK mais gros changement c'était en 2016 les gouvernement premier ministre Alan Chastanet il décidé qu'il a changé ça il pas nécessaire avec ça c'est quand il cause un chai problème partisan entre ces deux partisans gouvernement avec premier ministre. Mais ça qui est important en l'histoire qu'on nous va dire c'était en temps ça là gardé pour deputy speaker Premier ministre, c'était honorable Sarah Flood-Beaubrun. Il était électé comme député speaker, même jour, mais un jour et bien 2 jours après, il a des positions pour prendre en position comme ministre, puisque ça qui est important pour savent qui c'est le monde qui est député speaker, pas ni pour ni en position comme ministre gouvernement, il pas ni pour servir comme ministre gouvernement. Ben, alors, honorable Sarah Flood-Beaubrun, il était nominé pour député speaker. Il a été c'est 2 jours après, et bien 1 jour après.
2 days after.
Ok, il était 2 jours après, premier ministre appointé comme ministre gouvernement. Alors, il partait ça servir comme député speaker. Avec position, ça là, c'était sans un monde en position, ça là pour 5 années. Avec ça, gouvernement qui a essayé de corriger Jodia avec changement en constitution.
Well, when the parliament convened for the first time after the 2016 elections, the governing party of then Prime Minister Alan Chasney, Leon Theodore John, the government's nominee, was chosen as Speaker without dissent. However, an embarrassing silence descended on the assembly of the great, the good, and the party faithful gathered for this splendid ceremonial occasion, when the honorable members of the House failed to nominate someone for the position of Deputy Speaker as the Constitution mandated that they should. After the House recessed for a brief consultation between Prime Minister Chasney, who was also the leader of government business, and the opposition leader, now Prime Minister Philip J. Pierre, Chasney nominated Sarah Flood-Beaubrun for the position of Deputy Speaker, as she was the only one on his team whom he had not yet named to the cabinet. The House accepted the nomination, and its business continued, with the Governor General, Dame Paulette Louisi, entering the chamber to deliver her throne speech. 2 weeks later, not 2 days, 2 weeks later, a new twist to the drama of the appointment of a deputy speaker, as Sarah Flood-Beaubrun was announced as the minister in the Ministry of External Affairs, headed by Alan Chasney. The deputy speaker position had again become vacant, and despite the speaker's frequent calls subsequently to the House to appoint someone for the position, it continued to remain unoccupied. The then opposition St. Lucia Labour Party refused to nominate one of its 6 MPs to be Deputy Speaker because it accused the Prime Minister Alan Chasney then of flouting the conventional practice of governing parties nominating the deputy in his desire to remove, Alan Chasney flouting the conventional practices of the governing party, nominating the deputy in his desire to reward all his victorious party members with ministerial positions. The SLP claimed that it would not endorse the Prime Minister's profligacy of the largest cabinet in the country's history. On the other hand, then Prime Minister Chasney espoused the position that there was no constitutional provision for the deputy speaker to be chosen from the ruling party, and therefore no reason why the opposition could not provide a nominee. The impasse continued because the Constitution does not specifically impose an urgency for the position to be filled. Section 36(1) states that if the office of Deputy Speaker falls vacant at any time before the next dissolution of Parliament, the House shall, as soon as convenient, elect another member of the House to that office. Leon Theodore's illness after an unbroken 12-hour session in the Speaker's chair meant that the time was convenient for a Deputy Speaker to be in place. It was still not convenient then. And certainly, time for reform of the country's constitution is now. We have the opportunity to correct this situation and make sure this never happens again. And we are rid of this as soon as convenient. Michael.
Merci Winston pour tout détail ça là au banou. Il capable être comme que nous commencer session tout à l'heure puisqu'il nous plus en charge différents membres parlement représentatifs différents constituencies à assemblée et peut-être nous avons des qui matcher mais nous avons anti signe comme que il a commencé à n'importe moment. Mais ça qui est intéressant, c'est à part des députés speakers, là aussi, qui est intéressant, comme on dit tout à l'heure, ça fait l'argent que le gouvernement a prêté pour finir Saint-Jude, ça savent associer différents rapports liés à social media, en fait, tout partout en discussion, où quand un monde qui a parlé de situation Saint-Jude, avec le gouvernement, comme on dit tout à l'heure, il a fait un commitment qui a continué à travailler à sous Saint-Jude pour délivrer à ce en premier qui a commencé et il a essayé l'argent qu'il a prêté c'est 3 millions 500 000 $. 3 millions 500 000 $. Hot Bank Republic Caribbean, ça c'est Bank Eastern Caribbean, en anglais nous dit Republic Bank Eastern Caribbean Limited, avec Yokai fait décision ça. Et bien, il semble comme on était dit tout à l'heure, speaker Jean à la porte là, et que nous avons commencé à présent.
Let us pray. Almighty God, by whom alone kings reign and princes decree justice, and for whom alone cometh all counsel, wisdom and understanding, with thine unworthy servants here gathered together, in thy name, do most humbly beseech thee to send down thy heavenly wisdom from above, to direct and guide us in all our consolations. And grant that we, having thy fear always before our eyes, and laying aside all private interests, prejudices, and partial affections, the result of all our counsels may be to thy glory of thy blessed name, the maintenance of true religion and justice, the safety, honor, and happiness of the king, the public will, peace and tranquility of St. Lucia, and the uniting and knitting together of the hearts of all persons and estates within the same in true Christian love and charity, one towards another, through Christ our Lord. Amen. The grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, and the love of God, and the fellowship of the Holy Ghost be with us all evermore. Amen.
Good morning, honorable members. I am in receipt of correspondence advising of the absence of the member for Babonneau and the member for Labrie, who are away on official business. I also advise of the absence of the member for Castries Southeast, who is unwell, and I ask that you join with me in sending prayers his way and to wish him a speedy and complete recovery. I'm also in receipt of a note from the member for Soisel advising that he will be slightly delayed. Members will recall that on the 12th of July 2022, the House appointed a joint select committee relative to the banking bill. The leader of government business thereafter advised the following members as his nominees: the member for Vieux-Fort South, the member for Ancillary Canaries, and the member for Castries South. The Senate advised Senators Dominic Fede and Deal Lee as their nominees. I am now in receipt of correspondence dated March 2nd from the Leader of the Opposition indicating his nominees to sit on the Joint Select Committee with respect to the banking bill. He has nominated himself and the member for Soisel. Senate President Honorable Alvina Reynolds would like me to extend her thanks to members of this chamber who attended last Friday's meeting and to congratulate the women on a very successful seminar. I also wish to inform that International Women's Day will be observed on Wednesday, March 8th, that's tomorrow, under the theme Digit All, Innovation and Technology for Gender Equality. On that day, individuals are asked to wear purple in support of the cause. Statements by ministers. Minister for Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And good morning to you, Mr. Speaker. Good morning, colleagues. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to make this brief statement to the House and to St. Lucia on the United States Military Medical Mission 2023. The Ministry of Health, Wellness and Elderly Affairs, in collaboration with the Ministry of External Affairs, is coordinating a surgical and dental mission by the United States Military Medical Mission. This medical mission is scheduled to be undertaken in St. Lucia during the period of Wednesday, March 8th to Wednesday, March 22nd, 2023. The team is led by Lieutenant Colonel Gentry Mobley, Lamat Mission Commander 774, Air Expeditionary Squadron Commander. Minor surgical and dental procedures and medication shall be provided free of charge to St. Lucian nationals who are in need of the care being offered and who registered at our wellness centers. The minor surgical procedures being offered include removal of cysts and masses, hernia repair, other minor surgical procedures, and laparoscopic procedures. These procedures will be carried out at the Owen King EU Hospital, OKEU. Dental services will include extractions, fillings, stabilization and dental hygiene related services and cleaning, and inoperative extractions. These procedures will be carried out at the Laclery Wellness Center from 8:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. daily during the course of the mission. Dental services will also be provided at the Soufriere Hospital on selected days. Patients have registered at various health and wellness centers all around St. Lucia and will be referred to the Military Medical Mission. Hundreds of St. Lucians have registered from all walks of life and from all around the country for surgeries and medical care. We are also pleased that a number of people with challenges and physical disabilities will also receive care. Other activities include emergency medical training, advanced cardiac life support, advanced trauma life support training, and laparoscopy training. It is estimated that $1 million it is estimated that the value of the services is $1 million, $250,000 in terms of supplies and pharmaceuticals and so on, and other medical personnel. All visiting medical staff participating in the mission have been vetted as per legal requirements by the respective medical and dental, pharmacy, nursing, and allied health councils. As we have done with other visiting health missions, our national health practitioners will be working alongside the visiting volunteers. A register of patients seen will be kept, and all cases will be referred to local health professionals as necessary for follow-up to ensure the continuity of care. I visited the team this morning, Mr. Speaker, and I can tell you that they are ready to go and they will begin work today at the OKEU Hospital. I wish to thank the Ministry of External Affairs, the Permanent Secretary, and Ministry of Health, Wellness and Elderly Affairs, the Chief Medical Officer, the OKEU staff, and all who made this possible. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Minister for Housing.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in 1948, a substantial part of the city of Castries was destroyed by a fire. Consequent thereon was the construction of what was then considered temporary housing stock, commonly referred to as the CDCs. But what begs answers, Mr. Speaker, how long is temporary, and can those buildings still fall within the ambit of being considered safe for human habitation? Mr. Speaker, those more than 70-year-old buildings are a disaster waiting to happen, and the prime concern of this government is the safety of the occupants. There is absolutely no doubt, Mr. Speaker, that the structural integrity of those buildings have been severely compromised, and in the current state of some of them, the safety of the residents must be given heightened consideration. Not too long ago, a window from one of them on the upper floors detached through rot and fell from about 20 feet onto the pavement. It was because of divine intervention. There was no consequent injury or death. Last weekend, and it's on the screen as we speak, Mr. Speaker, last weekend my attention was drawn to what appears to be an extremely urgent situation of an upper floor balcony in one of the buildings which was on the verge of collapse. Members of the National Housing Corporation team had to quickly respond by using metal props to hold up the balcony. It must be noted, Mr. Speaker, that people live there. The situation is dire and is simply unsustainable. How long do we have to act is a question that I personally cannot answer. What can be readily answered, though, that the structural engineering reports and the naked eye can see that some of those buildings are unsafe for occupation, and the slightest natural disaster can see the instant collapse of some of them. I pause here to reiterate, Mr. Speaker, that the government's prime consideration is the safety of our people. In that regard, Mr. Speaker, we must engage in dialogue with the occupants of the various buildings on a case-by-case basis. Government's social consciousness must be invoked and must be juxtaposed to the imminent danger that the residents find themselves in. Consequent upon dialogue, I am confident that together we can find a compromise that will strike a balance between their safety and living with a peace of mind. I look forward to meeting with them and an amicable resolution of such a lingering misfortune. After all, Mr. Speaker, I can say boldly that this government cares about our people. I thank you.
Papers to be laid. Prime Minister, Minister for Finance, Economic Development, Youth Economy, Justice and National Security.
Speaker, good morning. I beg to lay the following papers signed in my name. Statutory Instrument number 23 of 2023, Public Finance Management Act, Resolution of Parliament to borrow for capital or current expenditure, building capacity and resilience in the health sector to respond to the coronavirus.
Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Tourism, Investment, Creative Industries, Culture and Information.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to lay the following papers in my name. Statutory Instrument number 22 of 2023, Tourism Stimulus and Investment, Windjammer Landing Company Limited Order, Citizenship by Investment, Annual Report 2021-2022. Thank you.
Minister for Education, Sustainable Development, Innovation, Science, Technology and Vocational Training.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to lay the following paper standing in my name. Statutory Instrument number 21 of 2023, Accreditation Act Commencement Order.
Minister for Commerce, Manufacturing, Business Development, Cooperatives and Consumer Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to lay the following paper appearing in my name. Export St. Lucia Annual Report, April 2020 to March 2021.
Motions, Prime Minister and Minister for Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to present, Mr. Speaker, the Public Finance Management Act. Whereas it is provided under Section 65(1) of the Public Finance Management Act, Cap 15.01, the Act, that the Minister of Finance may, by an affirmative resolution of Parliament, grants a guarantee in accordance with an enactment. And whereas it is further provided under Section 69(2) of the Act, that a guarantee issued by the government or contingent liability created by the government in accordance with the regulations under the Act and in accordance with another enactment shall be charged and paid out of the consolidated fund. And whereas it is provided under Section 20A1 of the St. Jude Hospital Act, Cap 11.20, that the Minister of Finance may, with the approval of Parliament, guarantee in the manner and on conditions as he or she thinks fit the payments of the principal and interest of an authorized borrowing by the hospital. And whereas it is further provided under Section 20A2 of the St. Jude Hospital Act, Cap 11.20, that where the Minister of Finance is satisfied that there has been default in the payment of principal money or interest guarantee, he or she shall direct the repayment out of the consolidated fund and for the amount in respect of which there has been a default. And whereas the Minister of Finance considered it necessary to guarantee an overdraft facility in the amount of $3.5 million from the Republic Bank, Eastern Caribbean Limited, the bank, to the St. Jude Hospital for the purpose of assisting with working capital requirements, and whereas the repayment of the advances are on demand, and whereas the interest is payable monthly at the bank's base lending rate from time to time, less 4% per annum, with a present effective rate of 6% per annum, and whereas a commitment fee of $5,000 is payable on acceptance of the commitment letter, be it resolved that Parliament authorizes the Minister of Finance to guarantee an overdraft facility in the amount of $3.5 million from the Republic Bank, Eastern Caribbean Limited, to St. Jude Hospital for the purpose of assisting with working capital requirements. For the purpose of assisting with working capital requirements. Be it further resolved that the repayment of the advances are on demand. The interest is payable at the bank's base lending rate from time to time, less 4% per annum, with a present effective rate of 6% per annum. A commitment fee of $5,000 is payable on acceptance of the commitment letter. Mr. Speaker, this resolution is the continuation of the government's sincere interest in St. Jude and healthcare in the south of the country. Mr. Speaker, you may recall that the St. Jude Hospital was the only institution that could not borrow from a commercial bank in its own, using its own resources or its own finances. The only institution that could not do that. What happened before, Mr. Speaker, is that Minister of Finance signed a letter to the bank giving the hospital what is called an operating line of credit. The last letter was written on the 16/12/21, signed by the Minister of Finance, which gave an operating line of credit of $2.5 million to the bank, Mr. Speaker, to the hospital. Mr. Speaker, St. Jude Hospital, and I'm speaking about what passes for hospital at the stadium, and again I want to put on record my sincere apologies to the people of the South and the people of St. Lucia for they having to endure more than 13 years of this hardship. And when the time came for them to be relieved, they again were made to suffer with the construction of a box, which will never finish, Mr. Speaker. But Mr. Speaker, the government saw it necessary to alleviate this situation, to help alleviate the situation. Mr. Speaker, when we came into government, we found that suppliers were owed $3.2 million by St. Jude. That there's a request for payment of $269,000, payment of salary increases and back pay to the workers of $269,000. Mr. Speaker, that is the tale of many institutions, the tale of the financial situation in many institutions, Mr. Speaker, in July, August 2021. That is the tale, Mr. Speaker. That's the tale of financial management that this government had to deal with. St. Jude Hospital, that you speak so much about, the freight payment, $3.2 million owed to suppliers, St. Jude Hospital. $269 million owed salary increases and back pay to workers. That was the situation, Mr. Speaker, St. Jude. So, Mr. Speaker, the government, the cabinet decided by cabinet conclusion that we would increase that line of credit from 2.5 million to 3.5 million. But to do that, the bank needed a guarantee from the government, and St. Jude needed to be able to borrow Because as I said before, they were the only institution that could not borrow on their own from a financial institution. So we needed to do these two things, Mr. Speaker. The Cabinet, by conclusion, 4th October 2022, Mr. Speaker, the Cabinet conclusion approved the transmission of a resolution to Parliament seeking approval for the government of St. Lucia to approve the guarantee for a credit line of $3.5 million for St. Jude. This means, Mr. Speaker, that St. Jude would have at least $1 million more for its working capital, Mr. Speaker. And, Mr. Speaker, this means that St. Jude will be repaying from their own resources, but if there is a shortfall, the government will meet the repayments for the guarantee if there's a shortfall, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, this is just more evidence of the government trying to take these institutions from the financial mess that we got them, Mr. Speaker. Next week, we'll be coming to the Parliament for another resolution for the OKEU hospital, Mr. Speaker. Another resolution. And that is a tale, Mr. Speaker, that when you hear the tale of that institution and what we found financially in that institution, Mr. Speaker, even you, Mr. Speaker, will be very concerned. But next week, we have to deal with it. The people of St. Lucia give us the money to deal with it. And next week, we will come into Parliament again with another resolution to help another medical institution to clear the mess that we found in that institution in August 2021, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, I just want to ask members to approve this resolution. It's not all what St. Jude needs. St. Jude needs a lot more. Only last week, the Minister for Health, he made a donation of a machine, a very important machine, was given to St. Jude. You may notice in the last budget, there was money budgeted for and spent to improve, to alleviate the conditions, Mr. Speaker, at St. Jude. It's not about talk, or it's not about the building of a building that is just for show, Mr. Speaker. It's about definitely improving the quality of service of health delivery at St. Jude. And that is what we are doing incrementally until we can move the patients and the staff, Mr. Speaker, to the original facility which we are repairing. And I want to tell you, Mr. Speaker, work is moving at a pace, and hopefully we shall get there at the appropriate time, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, this is my contribution to allow St. Jude to breathe. Not enough. St. Jude needs a lot more to allow St. Jude to breathe, Mr. Speaker. And once more, I want to put on record my thanks and appreciation to the staff, the board and the staff and the workers at St. Jude for what is really a labor of love, Mr. Speaker. What is really a labor of love? But I want to tell them that liberation is near, and very, very, very shortly, we will have them operating in much better circumstances. This line of credit will improve, albeit slightly, their financial situation, Mr. Speaker. I hope that members will support this resolution. I thank you.
Honourable members, the question is that Parliament authorizes the Minister for Finance to guarantee an overdraft facility in the amount of EC $3.5 million from the Republic Bank Eastern Caribbean Limited to the St. Jude Hospital for the purpose of assisting with working capital requirements. Be it further resolved that A, the repayment of the advances are on demand, B, the interest payable monthly at the bank's base lending rate from time to time, less 4% per annum, with a present effective rate of 6% per annum. C, a commitment fee of $5,000 is payable on acceptance of the commitment letter. a member for Vieux-Fort North.
Oh, sorry. I'll take it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I stand here in support of the resolution which was moved by the Member of Parliament for Castries East and Prime Minister. The resolution speaks to a guarantee by this Parliament for an overdraft facility in the amount of $3.5 million from the Republic Bank, Eastern Caribbean Limited, to the St. Jude Hospital for the purpose of assisting with working capital requirements. I support this resolution, Mr. Speaker. I want to spend some time, Mr. Speaker, to explain to you and honorable members the importance of this resolution and why I believe we should support it. Mr. Speaker, it's very important, I believe, to remind honorable members that in 2003, the St. Jude Hospital Act number 7 was passed. It provided for an independent board of directors to manage the hospital. The government of St. Lucia partially subsidizes the hospital with an annual grant which is used to pay the salaries of hospital employees. The remaining operating costs, the costs are funded by revenue generated from patients of the hospital. And Mr. Speaker, you'll recall the impact of COVID-19, and certainly, in addition to the challenges of the hospital, COVID-19 increased uncompensated care at our hospitals. St. Jude Hospital has seen some effects of that, Mr. Speaker. In addition, bad debt and an increase in charity care since the pandemic, certainly we have seen a rise in these areas. Our hospital has seen increased labor costs due to increases in overtime and sessional services in response to the surge in patient admissions, nursing shortages, and so on. Consequently, Mr. Speaker, the hospital's cash flow position has been negatively impacted by a significant shortfall of $3 million in the subvention provided by government to pay salaries and a declining collection rate from 2019 to 2022, which translates, Mr. Speaker, into about $4 million of bad debt annually. Since 2019, there has been a shortfall in the annual subvention provided by the government and the actual cost of salaries and wages for the staff of the St. Jude Hospital. In addition, Mr. Speaker, some 20 nurses are needed to fill existing gaps, requiring $1.1 million in annual salary and wages. And I've spoken about this before. The absence of critical clinical equipment and supplies is compromising the quality of care to patients and negatively impacting the hospital's ability to generate revenue to meet operating expenses. Mr. Speaker, this is compounded by an increase in hospital admissions, 33% from 2015 to 2019. That is pre-COVID. I want to repeat this, Mr. Speaker. We saw an increase in hospital admissions, a 33% increase at the St. Jude Hospital from 2015 to 2019. The staff complement, and I've reported this before in this House, Mr. Speaker, the staff complement at the St. Jude Hospital increased by 62% since 2015. In other words, between 2015 and 2020 thereabout, 152 new staff members were added to the St. Jude Hospital payroll. So, Mr. Speaker, this requires an additional $6.7 million annually. So today's $3.5 million guarantee, Mr. Speaker, will go a long way. Although, as the Minister for Finance indicated, there is much more to be done. But the $3.5 million guarantee, Mr. Speaker, this morning speaks to this government's commitment. And every 2 months, every 3 months, Mr. Speaker, you see our commitment being demonstrated at the St. Jude Hospital, at the stadium. The critical equipment, Mr. Speaker, include anesthesiology machines, cardiac monitors, among others. In addition, what is very critical also for the St. Jude Hospital is the information technology backbone, which is in dire need of upgrading in order to sustain current operations at the hospital. But more importantly, to support digitalization of the hospital's operations in order to drive efficiencies and modernization. So, Mr. Speaker, the St. Jude Hospital is not simply asking for money. The money will be invested in technology, which will help to digitalize the hospital's operations even further, so that we can be more efficient with the resources which we are getting from government. It's very important also, Mr. Speaker, to note that critical supplies are required by the hospital, and the hospital will use $0.5 million to do this, to stock up with pharmaceuticals, to restore supplier confidence through payments and so forth. What is very critical also, Mr. Speaker, is the outstanding overdue debt to vendors, amounting to $3.2 million, Mr. Speaker. And as you can well imagine, this is negatively impacting vendor relationships, credit terms, and stock replenishment at the hospital. So this $3.5 million guarantee is well deserved, Mr. Speaker. I want to just draw your attention, Mr. Speaker, to the collection rate. And since 2019, the collection rate has gone down by 20%. Also, Mr. Speaker, since 2015, you have an additional 25 physicians, and therefore you require the money. And I just want to draw the attention of honorable members to the collection rate. In other words, Mr. Speaker, St. Jude Hospital did very well at its collection. I think it has to do with the communication of the hospital with the South, the history with not just the South but all its patients, because patients of the St. Jude Hospital come from all around St. Lucia. Or it may have to do with the history of the hospital in relation to how the hospital, people would bring in whether it be fish and so on, although that is not really encouraged now, Mr. Speaker. That is being managed. But compared to, for example, the Owen King EU Hospital, I reported in this house before that out of a possible $4 million in 2020-21, which of revenue which could have been collected for services, we were collecting 10%, maybe 400,000. And the hospital at the OKEU Hospital, the Millennium Heights Medical Complex, the team is working very hard to devise strategies, if I may use the term colloquially, maybe encouragement strategies, so that people can pay. But if you compare that to the St. Jude Hospital, in 2019, the collection rate was 52%, Mr. Speaker, 52% of the possible revenue at the St. Jude Hospital. So you can see during that time before COVID, people who use the services at the St. Jude Hospital, they were paying. And it is a myth, Mr. Speaker, that people don't want to pay their medical bills. I suspect it has to do with the strategies of the hospital and the relationships and so on. And we see there in 2019, 52%. But after COVID, by 2021, 2022, the collection rate is about 22%, Mr. Speaker, at the St. Jude Hospital. So you can see that COVID-19 also impacted the ability of individuals to pay. I'm being told by the St. Jude Hospital staff that things are beginning to pick up again and individuals continue to invest in their own health. So I wish to encourage everyone who use the health services. I mean, I know everyone cannot pay everything all the time, but do your best to put a little something aside for your own health. Many times people speak about, Mr. Speaker, they have to pay for health care. They have to pay for health care. I'm trying very hard I say it sometimes, but Mr. Speaker, these days I'm trying very hard to change my language. We are not paying for health care, you are investing in health care. When you go to the doctor, Mr. Speaker, you are not paying for anything. When you go to the doctor, you must go every year, and those of us who have not gone this year, do your annual checks, and I encourage everybody, do your annual checks. Check your ears, check everything, your eyes. So when you spend $200, I know sometimes you say it's difficult. When you do that, or you go to the St. Jude Hospital, or the Soufriere Hospital, or the Owen King EU Hospital, and you spend $20, $40, or $60, people tell you, when you pay pour doctor, nous pas payer pour docteur, ou ka faire investment en dedans santé ou avec la vie ou. So I encourage everyone to continue to invest in your own health. In addition to the exercises and the walking and so on, and the water and so on, continue to invest in your own health. Even as we present universal health care on a phased way. Even as the government increases access to health services. And I wish to announce here, Mr. Speaker, for the first time, that on the 9th of March, Thursday, remember I came here to Parliament and I told you that we are establishing centers of excellence around the country. And the Miku Wellness Center, the new Miku Wellness Center, we have designated it the Center of Excellence for Non-Communicable Diseases. The Viewfort Wellness Center will be designated very soon. Okay? The Ancillary, the new Wellness Center, we have already given it its designation, but we are not making it public yet. It's coming, we are working on it. And these major health and wellness centers, we have come up with this idea of centers of excellence. Because we are a small country. We can't have we cannot afford a nephrologist in every single, we have 32 health and wellness centers. We can't, so what can we do? We can concentrate the services. And I can tell you that this Thursday, International Women's Day is on Wednesday, the 8th. And on Thursday is International Kidney, we observe International Day for Kidney and so on. And on that day, on Thursday, we will be going down to the Miku Wellness Center where Dr. Merle Clark will be engaged, and we are going to have specialized nephrology services without cost, without charge for the people there at the Miku Wellness Center. That's just the beginning, Mr. Speaker. And we will go on like this at the wellness center. So you have specialist services. You can be referred by your wellness center, whether it be at Viewfort or at Bellevue or at Grace or at Larry Shoes and so on. You'll get an appointment and you'll go there to get nephrology services. We are looking at urology services also at the Miku Wellness Center. So when we do Viewfort, I'm not going to say what it will be, but we're already working on it. We'll have specialist services also. So what it will do, Mr. Speaker, it will lessen the burden on St. Jude Hospital, on the OKEU Hospital. So we are beginning the process of phasing in universal health care, and the bigger announcements will come in the budget. So, Mr. Speaker, je veux dire, tout le monde qui aujourd'hui nous venons au Parlement pour demander au Parlement pour autoriser le ministre des Finances pour nous ça nous créer l'anglais en garantie. Ça veut dire l'hôpital Saint-Jude besoin 3,5 millions de dollars. C'est pas ça qu'il a besoin tout seul. Mais nous avons aidé avec 3,5 millions de dollars parce que l'hôpital là a chaque difficulté. L'hôpital là a une difficulté parce que y a plus de monde qui travaille là. Il y a 152 personnes appelées depuis 2019, Mr. Speaker. Yo ni pli moun ka travail avec yo ni pli dette. En chay yo dwe moun ki yo ka gen remède en la main yo. La ni chay ces machines nan yo besoin changer avec semaine passée ministre finance avec Ministry of Health nous joignons l'argent pour gagner ça nous a créé anesthésia machine 9 by St. Jude Hospital. Et l'hôpital là a essayé de faire des démarches pour changer ce système computer côté yo ka ça ni service plus facile by ces moun nan. Team là qui St. Jude yo ka travailler web pour assurer qui yo joine plus meilleur service, yo ni pour payer moun qui yo ka gagner remède en la main et tout ça 3,5 millions de dollars ça là ka servi. Premier ministre l'a dit avec nous qu'a dit nous ka travailler web pour tirer St. Jude à stadium là pour mettre à l'hôpital en OG. Mais pas du temps nous qu'a fait ça. Malheureusement, il y a une difficulté à ce stadium là avec le gouvernement ça là presque tous les 2 mois, presque tous les 3 mois, nous avons parlé avec St. Jude pour voir qui ça nous a fait pour faire situation primaire à St. Jude. Comme ça, M. Speaker, moi j'ai dit que nous avons été avec St. Jude, nous avons travaillé avec eux, avec un bon bagage, et moi je veux dire, pour temps pour dire ça, nous avons chaque difficulté avec les gens qui ne payer bill l'hôpital. À l'hôpital Owen King, EU Hospital, Millennium Heights, Jicler Victoria était là. Si l'hôpital là supposé joindre $100, c'est $10 tout seul. Yo ka joindre. Et ça fait combien de temps? Avec nous savons bagay difficile avec moun délai, mais moun ni pour payer un bagay, même si vous pas à payer tout bagay parce que c'est remède là nous ni pour gagner sorte l'autre pays. C'est docteur nous ni pour payer ces docteurs. C'est machine nous gagnons by St. Jude là $73,000. C'est les autres machines qui ont coûté millions de dollars. Comme ça, nous pour payer un bagage. Mais à l'hôpital St. Jude, ça nous a c'est gens qui sont allés St. Jude qui ont payé dette. Ils n'ont pas payé tout bagage. Mais avant Covid, environ 50% c'est l'argent qui moun doué St. Jude, ils ont payé. Comme ça a dit un bagage about ces moun ça là. Et moi, j'ai encouragé les gens qui sont allés St. Jude avec OKEU pour payer l'argent à les billes. Malheureusement, après Covid, 20% de gens qui ont payé les billes. Mais ces gens de l'hôpital St. Jude, ça a viré monter en l'air. Comme ça, moi, j'ai dit hurrah by ces gens qui sont allés St. Jude avec eux qui ont fait un investment. Ils ont mis l'argent dans le corps médical. Là où aller un docteur, ce n'est pas l'argent pour docteur. Parce que ce service là nous avons joué sortir docteur avec nos secteurs comme ça. Ce service là la valeur en chaque plus passé ou qu'à payer docteur. Mais si vous payez docteur $100, ce service là de la valeur c'est $300. Comme ça nous avons dit tout le monde mettez un petit l'argent à sous côté avec aller au docteur tous les années faire test sous poster test là c'était $60 mais si un petit pli ces jours ça là nous ça fait petit blood test sous PSC pour poster tout on pas espérer les bagailles la mauvais c'est docteur qui a dit moi là yo joue une cervical cancer stage 1 peut-être yo fait petit pap smear avec yo joue un petit bagaille yo ça ranger tes affaires mais si vous espérez stage 4 bail comme ça il a plus difficile et qui a coûté plus l'argent comme ça moi supporter resolution St. Jude ça là avec tout chez moi avec nous continuer travailler avec l'hôpital avec St. Jude pour mener plus bonne santé by chance cette ici. Merci Mr. Speaker.
The member for Dennery North.
Yes, comrade. Dennery North. Larry Shoes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to make a brief and succinct contribution on the motion being debated in the Parliament this morning. Mr. Speaker, any intervention by the government to bolster, strengthen, and improve the St. Jude Hospital will receive the unequivocal support of the member for Dennery North. And today, Mr. Speaker, is no exception. I stood in this parliament a few years ago as a member of the opposition, and I pledged support for interventions that will get towards making St. Jude a better facility for the people of the South. Mr. Speaker, I entered Parliament to compliment the people of Dennery North who have voted for me on 3 different occasions, sending me to the Parliament to champion their cause and give expression to their concerns. And throughout my sojourn in this Parliament, Mr. Speaker, no other state entity has been or has generated more spirited debate than the St. Jude Hospital. Mr. Speaker, I have heard members from both sides of the political divide opine on St. Jude and what could have been and what should have been. 13 years after the hospital destroyed St. Jude, Mr. Speaker, we asked that the fire destroyed the hospital, Mr. Speaker. We are still at a point where the hospital has not been reinstated to what it used to be prior to the fire. But I'm comforted, Mr. Speaker, knowing that the Prime Minister of the day has given a commitment that the St. Jude Hospital will be reinstated during this term of government. Mr. Speaker, after the fire, the member for Castries North and former Prime Minister almost immediately began the reconstruction efforts because he understood at the time, Mr. Speaker, how critical a facility the St. Jude Hospital was, not just for the people in the South, but for the country as a whole. And so, Mr. Speaker, almost immediately after the fire, reconstruction work started. There was a general election, Mr. Speaker. The people spoke, and in came a St. Lucia Labour Party administration under the leadership of the member for Vieux-Fort South, former Prime Minister. And Mr. Speaker, without wasting any time, he moved with immediate dispatch to continue the work that had started by the member for Castries North. Because he too, Mr. Speaker, would have had an even better understanding of the situation given the fact that he represents the constituency within which the hospital is situated. And Mr. Speaker, when it was necessary, he went out there looking for resources to continue the reconstruction effort. We went into general elections, Mr. Speaker, and there was another change of administration. And in came a new Prime Minister, the member for Micoud South. And Mr. Speaker, instead of taking a page from his prime ministerial predecessors and continue the work on St. Jude, he opted to suspend work not for 3 days because of bad weather, or for 3 weeks because he was preoccupied with other matters of state, but for 3 years. For 3 years, he suspended work on the hospital, Mr. Speaker. And when they finally realized that they were running out of time and that St. Jude would have played a significant role in deciding the outcome of the election, Mr. Speaker, you should have seen the level of fanaticism and whatnot that went into trying to manage the reconstruction of St. Jude on the eve of general elections. Engineers, Mr. Speaker, were being summoned night and day, asking them to find a formula to cause the United Workers' Party administration to open the hospital on the eve of elections, hoping that would have saved the day for them. Mr. Speaker, healthcare is too important. Healthcare is too important to the citizens of this country for us to treat it as a political football. And I knew they would have run out of time, as happened, Mr. Speaker. And you know what was most baffling? While work was suspended on the hospital, Commissioner Ryan Metley, Whilst work was suspended on the hospital, Mr. Speaker, night and day, morning, noon, at midnight, you had bulldozers, you had graders, you had rollers, you had tractors, you had construction workers, you had engineers and surveyors working round the clock, Mr. Speaker, less than 100 yards from the hospital premises or where they operated from, preparing grounds for horses to gallop at the expense of healthcare, Mr. Speaker. How can I come here, Mr. Speaker, and not...
Member for Denville, okay. Yes, member for Miko South.
Yes, I'm standing order 35. The member is misleading the House. Again, the member is suggesting that there is any connection between the DSH project and the hospital. I want to reiterate, there were no state funds at any time being used for the DSH project, and one has nothing to do with the other.
Please proceed, member for Denville.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Not that I'm required to respond to what the member has said, but Mr. Speaker, let the record show that I have not mentioned DSH, and I have yes, I said horses, and I'll be saying a lot about horses during the short time that I'll be on my feet. Mr. Speaker, I will repeat what I said. I said, whilst work was suspended on the hospital for 3 years, not 3 weeks, not 3 months, for 3 years, pour 3 années, gouvernement qui était à conduire pays, en bas JID, membre parlement pour Mikoud Soud, yo tout bout de travail à l'hôpital là pour 3 années. Mais pas de temps, travail pas qu'à fait à l'hôpital là, moins qui yon 100 meters, Mr. Speaker, from the hospital facility, you had tractors, you had graders, you had bulldozers, and that's a new word in the parliamentary lexicon or the political, bulldozers, Mr. Speaker, working night and day, preparing the ground. And if the member wants to say that the monies that were being expended there to prepare the grounds for horses did not come from the coffers of government, Mr. Speaker, he is free to say so. I did not say so. But I'm saying that as a government, you set the tone in the country, and you can decide and dictate what is priority in your country, irrespective of who is spending the money to give expression to those projects. And so, Mr. Speaker, I can understand why the people of the South, it was such a disconcerting experience for them to see that a prime minister, under whose watch the facility got destroyed by fire, almost immediately went to work to reinstate it, knowing the importance of that facility to the people of this country. He lost the elections. In came a new prime minister, Mr. Speaker. He too understood the importance of that facility and immediately went to work on St. Jude Hospital, Mr. Speaker. And he went out there in the international community, and on days when he could not have gone himself, the external affairs minister at the time was out there looking for grants and other forms of financing to reinstate St. Jude Hospital. And in came a new prime minister whose preoccupation was obviously not the hospital, because you cannot tell me that you have a vested interest in the people of the South, and your first opportunity to interface with them and to do something that impacts them meaningfully, you opted to suspend work on a hospital for 3 years, more than half your term, 3 years. And today, you are elsewhere at every opportunity, and you want to label yourself as a champion of the people of the South? Where can that happen, Mr. Speaker? How can we take that seriously? So, Mr. Speaker, this motion, as presented by the Prime Minister, ought to get the support of every member of this Parliament, on both sides. And I said, Mr. Speaker, that I have a particular interest in St. Jude Hospital because I know, as I've experienced on many occasions, that when my constituents come knocking at my door, I live in my constituency, they have not been able to reach the ambulance at 1:32 in the morning. They come to my home. And I know what it is like, Mr. Speaker, to take my keys, put them in my vehicle, and to take them to St. Jude Hospital. I can relate to that. because I know how important St. Jude Hospital is to the people of Denry North. So when the Prime Minister comes with a motion like this, Mr. Speaker, I do not believe it is enough for me to remain seated and not, on behalf of the people of Denry North, give expression to this as yet another intervention that will lead to the eventual reinstatement of St. Jude Hospital during this term of government. Mr. Speaker, it would be remiss of me to speak on the motion and not, like the member for Beaufort North, place on the record my gratitude and that of the people of Denry North to the nurses, the doctors, the ancillary staff, and all the individuals who continue to ensure that service is being dispensed at the hospital to the people from the south and elsewhere who go there, Mr. Speaker, in search of better health care. Mr. Speaker, je dis ça en créole. Je dis that Pierre
is Mr. Speaker, and it's very ironic because only over the weekend, as a gentleman who lives somewhere between Choiseul and Soufrière, some people say Chateau-Belair should be Soufrière, but he has a private business where he has he's purchased an ambulance, Mr. Speaker, fully equipped. In fact, he actually services the cruise ships sometimes when they have various needs. And he came to me, seeking what sort of arrangement can be made with government, because, Mr. Speaker, he's from the community, he has a heart. And there are many people who call him in the middle of the night, Mr. Speaker, and they cannot pay. And he has had to, make the trip. And he has indicated to me sometimes he has a flat fee. And when the people come on board, there are certain things that happen. He have to use up oxygen tank, and the people just cannot pay. So I don't know how that discussion can take place. Okay, so the minister has just given me a sort of a heads up that he's kind of familiar. How we can, because he's not the only one. I know people up here who also provide such a service, but I'm not sure whether they're facing that sort of humanitarian requests from the people that they carry. But all being said, Mr. Speaker, I support the motion. It's very important. I think all of us did support the initial requirement when it came to Parliament, and so I want to wish the management and staff and the board of St. Jude's all the best, and that this will go a long way to alleviate some of the challenges that the hospital is facing. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker.
The member for.
You want to yield to him?
Would you?
Yes, I will. I wouldn't like him.
Member from Mico South.
Yes, please. Okay, I have to switch with you. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Let me also lend my voice initially to the member from Castries Southeast, wishing him a speedy recovery, and certainly my empathies and sympathies to the members of his family during this very difficult period. Mr. Speaker, I also want to say that in anticipation of Women's Day, I've already been wearing my color purple. I'm glad I'm appropriately attired. And again, I think that most of us will always say that women have been the backbone of St. Lucia, notwithstanding that St. Lucia is named after a woman. And I just want to really say to all the women of St. Lucia, thank you for all that you do in terms of output of this country, but most importantly, what you do in terms of taking care of our family. And I'm certainly looking forward to the day, hopefully very soon, Mr. Speaker, that the country will be led by a woman. Mr. Speaker, this is actually a very straightforward bill that was obviously, in my humble opinion, Mr. Speaker, complicated because many other issues that one would have liked to have brought up were brought up by the members on the opposite side. So the reality is what we're coming here to the House to approve is after giving the authority for St. Jude's to be able to obtain a loan for with a government guarantee, and we're coming here to actually execute that part of it, of where they're getting $3.5 million, and I'm very grateful for the minister from the member from Vieux-Fort North explanation as to the breakdown of that expenditure. And that's a good thing. But it also brings up some very important questions, Mr. Speaker. And the reality is that our healthcare system has been failing us for a very, very long time. And I'm not going to pick on one administration or another administration, all of us. And I know that member from Soufrière-Fontaine-Jacques, member from Castries North, a member from Vieux-Fort South are all here, and over the years have participated in significant dialogue as to how we're going to fund healthcare. Because the reality, Mr. Speaker, the dependence of our healthcare system on recurrent expenditure from government is simply not working. And that stress has been made even greater, Mr. Speaker, by the expansion of our healthcare services. The reality is, whether the members on the opposite side care to admit it or not, but the delay in moving into OKEU in a large part was how were we going to fund it? So imagine all of a sudden not only having to fund an opening of OKEU, which was estimated to be 3 times what the current cost of operating Victoria Hospital was, but having to open up OKEU and at the same time, Mr. Speaker, keep Victoria Hospital open as a respiratory center. We're now adding healthcare centers, as the member from Vieux-Fort North alluded to. And I'll speak a little bit about maybe my own opinion in terms of their strategy. But the reality is the expenses of healthcare just from salaries has increased significantly. And the reality is that when you go through our budgets of successive years, almost 85%, Mr. Speaker, of the monies that governments are contributing to healthcare are for salaries. And the hospitals have been left to their own demise to play God. Because the reality is, Mr. Speaker, many occasions, then and now, doctors and nurses have to huddle together to determine who they're going to support. Whether it's the elderly person, who is our grandfather, or a young child, or a person in the middle of their career. These are very difficult decisions that anybody has to make. I feel very sorry, and I really want to say to the staff that we see you, we hear you, we understand, and how difficult it must be that sadly the system has put you in a position where you have to be confronted to make those kinds of decisions, Mr. Speaker. I challenge any one of us to have to sit there and to make that decision. But the reality as a government, not that we're going to get there overnight, but the attempt must be made, Mr. Speaker, on how we're going to solve that problem. And the reality is that a word that we don't like to speak about, a word that has become demonized in this country, economics, where is the revenue stream going to come from? So even in this instance, Mr. Speaker, where the government is going to be giving a government guarantee for St. Jude's for $3.5 million, the reason why the bank is asking for the guarantee, because the bank itself would know that St. Jude's is going to struggle to repay that money. St. Jude's is running at a deficit. And that deficit is made even worse every year, Mr. Speaker, as the economic situation tightens and people don't have the resources to be able to pay. Now, I've said many times in this House that St. Jude's actually has been exemplary because of the systems that were put in place in St. Jude's. And St. Jude's has actually done a much better job, Mr. Speaker, in collecting the revenues for services. Victoria Hospital was a disaster. A complete and utter disaster. Even when I went over there, Mr. Speaker, to see the big box with all the receipts, and they were collecting the receipts on a quarterly basis. Can you imagine? They're reconciling daily accounts on a quarterly basis. That's when they begin to tell you the lack of accountability and processes. And that's why, Mr. Speaker, that we were asking for international intervention through Cayman Health City to be able to import an operating system that would assist us in better, one, servicing the persons of St. Lucia, better financial accountability, and having a better idea as to how much actually healthcare is costing us. Because up to date, Mr. Speaker, none of us really know. Because we have a hodgepodge system that we're working with. We've never really provided the level of healthcare services that the people of this country are expected to have. But that's the problem. So, Mr. Speaker, I fully support this bill, but I want to say that some of the more meaningful discussions, almost 2 years has gone by, and despite many promises by this government, the promise that St. Jude's would be open has not happened. We keep on hearing about universal health care. Keep on asking, what does that mean? How is that going to come down to practical terms? Who is going to fund universal health care? How is it going to be funded? How is it going to be operationalized? No one has said that as yet. Not one person, Mr. Speaker, has said that. Not one. The fact is that the previous administration, led by me, was working on a healthcare insurance, an insurance in which persons would make a contribution of $1,000. Why? Because we were making it mandatory that every single person would have to have healthcare insurance. And those persons, almost 30 to 40,000 of them, that could not afford the insurance, government was going to make that contribution for them. But the reality is that when people would go into the hospital to obtain services, because of their health care insurance, the hospital will be now assured of getting the monies for the expenses that it incurred. Very important, Mr. Speaker, because without putting those kinds of safeguards in, Mr. Speaker, this loan that we're guaranteeing, I can guarantee you that government's going to have to pay it. And again, not blaming any administration. Many countries around the world are struggling with this, Mr. Speaker. It's a global dilemma. You hear it in America, you hear it in Canada, you hear it in the UK. There's no perfect system. But the reality is the system that we have, Mr. Speaker, is not addressing the critical issues in our country. We know statistically. The member from Vieux-Fort North has said it several times. Diabetes, hypertension are critical issues. And because people don't have access to medication, Mr. Speaker, we're having to rely on them voluntarily changing their lifestyles to address those issues. But I would say to you, Mr. Speaker, it is proven medically that even if you have hypertension, that even if you change your lifestyle, the likelihood is some people will still have to be on medication. And the risk of not being on medication is disastrous to that person. And the system we currently have cannot even address that. Mr. Speaker, again, it's not about, throwing out criticisms. We've always struggled, and it seems to be apparently very bad right now, the access to medication in our health system. And I have to imagine, with inflation taking place, some of the numbers that the member from Castries East has mentioned, it's difficult. And if we really did care, these are some of the things that we have to address. This is just a Band-Aid on the problem. Mr. Speaker, part of the Band-Aid ought to also be look at the operating cost at St. Jude's. We had a situation at St. Jude's, Mr. Speaker, where the line staff were on a separate pay scale, Mr. Speaker, to that of Victoria Hospital, now OKEU. And we were able to resolve that and put them on the same level of pay scale. But my understanding is, Mr. Speaker, is that there was an oxygen plant that was being built that ought to have been operationalized at this point, which certainly would have reduced the cost of oxygen. I certainly would like to hear either from the member from Castries East in his rebuttal, or at any other time that the member from Beaufort North chooses as to what that status is. And maybe if they don't know about it, I'm certainly happy to provide them with information to show them exactly where the oxygen plant is. Mr. Speaker, we want to also talk about, because it really ought not to have come up in this debate, the finishing of St. Jude's. Because we came here really to talk about an overdraft facility for the existing operation and not necessarily the finishing of St. Jude's. But when the member from Dennery North can make such egregious, irresponsible statements, Mr. Speaker, they have to be corrected. The fact, Mr. Speaker, is what is the member's suggestion? That until we resolve the healthcare problems, that we should have no other private sector projects taking place in St. Lucia. So that in essence, Mr. Speaker, that is what the member from, if he wants to stand on a point of order of hallucination, I'm happy for him to do that. But the reality, that is what the takeaway I got. Because, Mr. Speaker, he admitted that there was no state funds going into the DSH project. So the fact is, are all private sector projects to come to a grinding halt?
Mr. Speaker, on a point of order. Mr. Speaker, I never said in my presentation that there was no state funds going into DSH. That is not what I said. That is not what I said. I said whether the project was funded by state money or private interest. But I never said categorically that there were no state funds in DSH, and I'm not in a position to determine that, so I would not have said that.
Yes. Proceed, Member.
Now he has a chance to tell us whether we had state funds or not.
So, Mr. Speaker, there was never any state funds that was used to support the DSH project. You can say that categorically. Mr. Speaker, there was no state funds used for the DSH project. And the many allegations, particularly made by the member from Castries Central, that there were CIP funds. I heard him change his tune last time to say, oh, that they could have. Right? I mean, could have and would have. Again, I keep on saying this idea of these half-truths. So the reality, Mr. Speaker...
Member for Castries Central, member, please, whilst I will, as long as I'm here, I will not stop side comments. But you're almost making a speech, member. So if you're going to make a side comment, that's fine. Otherwise, allow the member to proceed and you can respond.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Those apologies are accepted. Mr. Speaker, the reality is that, so we have clarity, there was none. So the question is, if in fact there was none, I'm asking whether in fact my interpretation of what the member said is correct. That the reality is that the private project should come to a grinding halt until critical issues of national importance are resolved. These important issues would be healthcare. I accept that. I would imagine that crime. I would imagine education. I would imagine at what point. The reality is one has nothing to do with the other. The other thing I want to be able to take away, to allow persons to contemplate. The member spoke about construction didn't start for 3 years. That's correct. But that does not mean the project did not start. The fact is that a review of St. Jude's was taken up almost immediately. And the reality is, I would like to think, the reason why that this government has not been able to proceed with the old St. Jude's is for the same reason that the difficulty we had. Because the building is inappropriate, the building is a sick building, the building cannot be made into a decent healthcare service, far less a world-class health service, far less. And the reality is every single time that we wanted to start construction on the old site, it was impossible because there were so many unanswered questions and there were so many deficiencies that were in that building. And so the reality is work started right away. And it's when we had now exhausted every opportunity to try to make that building work, the realization came that we should build a new building. And the building of the new building was not to make the same mistakes that were highlighted in the same exit report of Shanta King. That you don't build a hospital overnight. There requires to be a certain amount of planning, both financial. So we saw the disaster that when you proceed to build a new hospital without the proper finances in place and you're going pokey, 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 it doesn't work. And it comes back to haunt us. So the reality is we spent time in designing a new building, finding the resources for the building, and being able to proceed, and then to be able to get a contractor. So work on St. Jude's, whether you physically saw it or not, had commenced literally within weeks of us getting into a government. And the reality is, Mr. Speaker, that the vision plan for the South, Mr. Speaker, had become substantially more ambitious than the members on the other side could ever dream of. The reality of putting in a cruise ship port, which now I see they've abandoned, into Vieux Fort. The ability now to be able to create the Pearl of the Caribbean. The ability to create call centers. The actual ability to make Vieux Fort a world-class city. A city that was going to be competitive with the rest of the Caribbean. A city that would take advantage of the opportunities that Guyana was offering us. And putting in the infrastructure that would now see a reverse of the trend of what was taking place, where people were now migrating from the south and going to the north. We already started to see it where people had begun now to migrate from the north to go to the south. Mr. Speaker, these are the truths. These were the realities on the ground. The airport, the world network system, the new water systems, and building the infrastructure to allow Vieux Fort to become and to stand on its own and to become a positive contribution to the economy of St. Lucia. So, Mr. Speaker, that is the purpose of St. Jude's. Excuse me? Mr. Speaker, I'm glad that the member from Denry North said that. He said that the water system is not ours. The reality is, when you deal with CDB, and I know the member from Vieux Fort South knows this, it takes many administrations to complete a CDB project. So the reality is the same bridge that we were working on in cul-de-sac was a continuation. The same OKEU was a continuation. In fact, when I was an economist, I worked on the OKEU all the way in the late 1980s. So, Mr. Speaker, has been a continuation for many years. But the reality is, Mr. Speaker, it's about implementing it and putting and making sure it happens. And that's one of the things I would say to you, is that our track record in holding CDB accountable and making them work and getting these projects. So instead of complaining about CDB, it's about working with CDB to make sure the work can get done, as well as working with the World Bank. I'm proud of the fact, Mr. Speaker, that the DVRP project that came in after Hurricane Tomas, and the then SLP government, when they came into government in 2006, left over $60 million unspent, Mr. Speaker. As the same person they want to demonize, Guy Joseph, that was able to spend that money according to the conditions of the World Bank. And more importantly, Mr. Speaker, a very important point is that when COVID came, was to amend the laws to allow the projects to be downsized and put out to bid so that solution contractors can benefit, to make sure that that money was in circulation. This idea of just having one contractor do all the work, that is going to cause significant economic problems in this country. So, Mr. Speaker, I would like to see the members on the opposite side finish St. Jude's. St. Jude's needs to be finished. But what I certainly would hope is that the same ambition that we had in building a world-class facility, that instead of people having to be helicoptered out of St. Lucia to go to Martinique, that the day will come that we can helicopter them to Vieux Fort in St. Lucia. And that the same kind of services that are available to some now will be available to all St. Lucians. Mr. Speaker, I heard the member from Castries East speak about the overdraft at St. Jude's and some of the other overdrafts that they found. This is a recurring decibel with the member. The fact is, if in fact he thinks that anything was done wrong, I don't know what's happening to the special prosecutor, but in the meanwhile, we have an Auditor General, we do have a DPP, we have many mechanisms that's available to him to press charges against anybody he believes did something wrong. But the innuendo that because that there are bills or overdrafts left when there's a change in administration, that goes without saying. Government doesn't stop. Political administrations change, but government doesn't stop. It's a continuity. So when you're borrowing money in advance in your budget to be repaid years later, and there's an overlap of administrations, clearly there's going to be an overdraft problem. But the question becomes, do you genuinely believe that there's maladministration? Now, on my records, there's only one government that has been officially accused of maladministration, and that is the SLP government. The member from Vieux Fort North spoke about centers of excellence. I didn't get to hear the full part, but I'm trying to, maybe he can help me, Mr. Speaker. The purpose of building these rural healthcare centers, Mr. Speaker, was to decentralize healthcare. The reality is the cost of operating a hospital and a bed in a hospital is completely different than what the cost is in operating a bed or providing services in a healthcare center. So the reality is that healthcare centers are used to prep people, and then they go to get their operations at the hospital, and then they go back home for recovery. The idea I'm hearing from the member that we're going to have each of the healthcare centers specialize. And does that mean that if Ancillary Canneries Healthcare Center is specialized in some area, that members from Micoud North and Micoud South or from Vieux Fort have to now drive up to that location? And it would seem to me that if we're putting in these healthcare facilities, that it's better to have actually asked the specialists to rotate. Because the idea is the people who provide the specialty, not the buildings. And so if we're going to have dedicated units, like he had mentioned before, of specialty, and having those special units rotate around the island to make sure that those services are available to everyone, that to me would be much better, and certainly in understanding now that bus fares have gone up, and certainly the lack of reliability of the public transportation, that we must be mindful. I mean, I know for years we've spoken about decentralizing government, too many people having to come up to Castries to get their services, and to waste an entire day. So this idea of decentralizing, I would certainly, for my 2 cents, put that in. Mrs. Speaker, so Mr. Speaker, that is my summary of my contribution. I just want to say I do support the bill. I want to thank, like everyone else, the staff at St. Jude's and at all the hospitals for the incredible work that they do, the difficult positions that we put them in, we as government people. And again, I'm not so sure there is a perfect system given the size of our economy, but the reality is I do know that we can do a lot better than we're currently doing, and that to understand and appreciate that this bill is only a bandage. All this is doing is allowing them to access cash now, but the reality is, and the reason why the bank is asking for the government guarantee, there are not sufficient revenue streams available to any one of the hospitals. Although St. Jude's is better, they still have a significant gap in terms of what it costs to provide health care and what the revenue that they're currently collecting. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Both lights came on at the same time. I'm not sure which. The member for Castries Central.
Although I wouldn't be long, but Mr. Speaker, it would be remiss of me if I did not make a contribution, albeit brief, to this debate. You see, sometimes, Mr. Speaker, when you listen to persons, you ask yourself whether it is that same person who said something totally different on a previous occasion. Because the member for Miku South pointed to his tie and he said he's wearing this in remembrance of Women's Day, observance of Women's Day. The same member from Miku South who called single mothers criminals, breeders. The same member from Miku South who refused to endorse Janine Compton's enlistment to the National Trust. The same member from Miku South who chastised Janica Simon overtly. Is that the member who is today observing Women's Day? I cannot believe it. A man who threatened to take away children from single mothers. Take away their children because they cannot feed their children. But today you observe their day. Mr. Speaker, I listened and I heard the member speak of St. Jude as though there is any kind of likability to St. Jude insofar as he is concerned. And I will tell you exactly why, from a factual basis, that the member for Miku North did not give two hoots about St. Jude. Miku South, sorry. Mr. Speaker, you will recall that the member for Castries North was then Prime Minister when this country met this unfortunate calamity. Alarm bells rang not only throughout the jurisdiction of St. Lucia, across the waters. Members of the diaspora, friendly governments, friendly agencies, school children gave their lunch monies in an effort at urgent restoration of St. Jude. That was a call for national unity. The quest was to rebuild forthwith. And then the member for Castries North was no longer Prime Minister. The member for Viewfort South came in. What did he do? He continued. He continued because he realized that you could not sacrifice St. Jude on the altar of political loyalty. He continued. What did the member for Miku North do? He came in and he stopped it, Miku South again, stopped it for 3 years. 3 years. Today, Mr. Speaker, it is a statement I've made before. I have the privilege of sitting in this august chamber with 4 persons who either sit or once sat on the prime ministerial chair, 3 of which saw it was worthy to continue with our St. Jude. There is only one who, for whatever reason, believed that that was not the way to go. And I've said before and I will say again, He laments the fact that we don't have money. But it is his stewardship, Mr. Speaker, that has us in this financial quagmire. He is the one who caused it. Because when he assumed governance or prime ministership of this country, St. Jude was 80% or thereabout complete. And the last prime minister had left a revenue stream for its completion. He had borrowed monies and the balance was there. All he had to do was to complete it. But no, that little bit of money was not enough. There would not be enough to touch or to steal, I dare say. And so,
Member Vacastris, Central.
It's just a supposition. I'm accusing no one.
You can't make that kind of allegation.
Very well, Mr. Speaker.
So please withdraw that statement.
I withdraw that statement. So the word steal cannot be used in this honorable chamber, Mr. Speaker?
In relation to a member?
No, I'm not. No, I'm not using it in relation to a member.
That the monies left by the member for Viewfort South was not enough to steal. So
yes, that's what I'm saying. It was not enough for them to steal. Okay, I withdraw.
Just withdraw the statement, then.
I withdraw. Yes, Mr. Speaker. But it is undoubted, Mr. Speaker, that they needed a cash cow. The little loan, the balance of the little loan that was left by the former Prime Minister member for Viewfort South was not enough. And so, Mr. Speaker, they embarked upon the construction of a box. And it started with the foundation moving from $3 million and eventually costing $9 million. 9 plus. And so, Mr. Speaker, the lavishness started. But you know what? They were warned. And I see a man seated in front of me, Mr. Speaker. Even his father signed a letter saying, Professor, l'hôpital neuf, wrote the then Prime Minister and members of Cabinet a letter, supporters of the United Workers' Party. You'll get it. Asking the members of Cabinet to refrain from starting the construction of any other facility. But you know, Mr. Speaker, the renowned saying is, I don't listen. I let the jackasses bray. And they did not listen. And it cost them dearly, Mr. Speaker. But Mr. Speaker, not only that, you are the very man who brought in Cayman City. You are the very man who sidelined a committee that was already in place to see the smooth transition from Victoria Hospital to OKU. You sidelined all of them and gave a contract to Cayman City and asked Cayman City to come over and had meeting with the Cayman City people at Cap Estate saying, I'll employ you all, I'll pay you all a lot of money. And today this Minister of Finance has to borrow some $11 million to pay Cayman City. $11 million to do what we otherwise could have done with our own human resources. And you have the audacity to open your mouth and talk about management. You know, management. Mr. Speaker, we don't have resources in this country. You come in as a new government. Member from Castries now started. Member from Viewfort South continued. You came in, the first thing you do is bulldoze 2 buildings. Can you believe this? You bulldoze 2 buildings that form part of the hospital that cost $7 million to construct, and you did it with impunity. And today talk about revenue stream, Mr. Speaker. You know, what is even worse, and I told you they needed a cash cow 11 days before the elections. 11 days before the elections, you are awarded a contract of $70 million to be paid in 1 year at 1% interest per day if payments are late. Can you believe this? And Mr. Speaker, in that contract, the payments are outlined. The first payment, which was due 3 months after signing, was for over $28 million. Fresh start. Again. You know, again. $28 million. And you know, Mr. Speaker, can you do that to a country and tell me that in all sincerity you care about that country, man? And if that payment was delayed by 1 day, it's over $280,000 a day. And you stand here, and you want to parade as though you are the guru of all gurus. You know everything. You know? Self-righteous, self-indignation. That is what you put the country through. I listened to the man talk about DSH, the member, talk about DSH is not our money. Mr. Speaker, I would like to ask him whose money he built the $15 million bypass road with. Whose money was it? Whose money paid for the alternative land when he removed the farmers? Whose money was it? And whose land was it when he gave it to this man at $1 an acre for 99 years? And tell me the state didn't have resources in it? You know, but then he always says the truth is what you believe. You know, the audacity of some people. You know, I mean, it's just like the CCJ. You have 4 prime ministers. 3 are saying, let us move in that direction. It is better for the country. You alone want to go this way. You know, as though there is some kind of recognition in going against the interests of this country and its people. And Mr. Speaker, whilst I stand here, I am proud to say that it pleased my ear when I heard a civil servant say that the country is seeing better financial management under the leadership of Philip J.P. It pleased my ear. And you know, Mr. Speaker, you know the evidence is there. The evidence is there. When I told you they needed a cash cow, Transparency International has quoted the results of the actions and the deeds. Because we moved, Mr. Speaker, from a 71 percentage points being seen as free from corruption, and in 1 year they took us to the lowest low of 40. That is the lowest in the history of this country. It was brought up by the member from Castries North when he was Prime Minister. He brought it up to 71 percentage points. It was maintained by the Labour Party under the stewardship of the member for Viewfort South. Maintained that same ranking. And in 2017, when the member for Miku South, became Prime Minister, that is the year this country was seen as the most corrupt. We moved from 71 to 40. And here is, Mr. Speaker, when they left it at 45. And in one calendar year, 2022, this government took our freedom from corruption perception from 45, we are now at 58. 13 percentage points added. And you want to talk about, you know how to do things. And, you know, Mr. Speaker, some people I just don't understand. I don't understand at all. Whether they will do the same thing with their personal resources is a question that one needs to ask. One needs to ask whether you would have taken your money and a man, you gave him a contract of $3 million, he ends up bringing you a bill of over $9 million for a foundation. Would you give a man a contract of $70 million with interest payable at 1% per day? They call themselves financial gurus, but they're financial gogos. That's what they are. And then ask, how will we finance the opening of St. Jude? You know, qui can't take question, sir? How will we finance the opening of St. Jude? Mr. Speaker, probably had we have the $24 million sandals kept, or probably had we had...
Member from Microsoft, you have a point of order?
The member is just misleading the House, Mr. Speaker. I've heard several times, Mr. Speaker, that he alludes to this $24 million. I have clarified the point, but maybe now that we have a new government, that they can clarify that there was never $24 million.
What is the point of order?
That, Mr. Speaker, that there's no $24 million. The member said that we forgave $24 million for sandals.
Well, I didn't hear him say that today.
Sorry?
He said that today?
He just said it, Mr. Speaker.
He said if we had, I didn't hear him say you forgive.
That's correct.
So if we had the $24 million we forgave, what would be the...
No, he didn't say forgive. He said if we had the $24 million today.
That we gave sandals. That's what he said, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, I can no longer...
You gave Sanders?
That's what he said,
didn't say that.
If in fact I've heard wrong, and he's just saying categorically if we had $24 million, I have no problem. But it's the follow-up where he says if we had the $24 million that we gave Sanders. So it's for the member to clarify that.
He didn't make the point about giving Sanders.
He did.
Mr. Speaker, if we had the $32 million that was given to Loco B, if we had the $15 million that was used to do the bypass road for T.O.R. King, if we had our 1,000 acres of land that he gave at $1 an acre.
Mr. Speaker, again, Mr. Speaker, the member is misleading the House. There was no giving of any 1,000 acres at $1 an acre, Mr. Speaker.
What was it?
Mr. Speaker, we leased 230 acres at $1 a year for the lease, and we sold the remaining amount of lands for $60,000 an acre.
Where's the money?
It's in the bank.
Member of Castries Central, the member of Mico South, has said that there's no 1,000 acres at $1 a year lease. It's 230, did you say, member? 230? 230. And the remainder was sold.
Huh? Mr. Speaker, you see, when one calls on a prime minister to account, when that deal, that agreement was disclosed, a defensive tone, defensive posture was assumed almost immediately. That's not the agreement. They are addendums. This is fake. This is fake. And today...
Member of Castries Central, I understand what you're saying.
Very well.
But the member has also pointed out that this administration has been in office for 18 months and has access to the documents.
Very well, Mr. Speaker. I get that point, Mr. Speaker. And we will be getting the documents. You know, in fact, Mr. Speaker, I believe some of those things need to be debated in the House. They need to be debated in the House. Because I remember before the election, I went on a certain person's Facebook page and I saw a building with cladding and it was labeled state-of-the-art hospital. And when I visited it, Mr. Speaker, like they say in Patwa, it was as empty as the car park that's over there, except it had cladding. No conduits, no electricals, no air conditioning, absolutely nothing. It was no roof, nothing. It was columns on column slab, column slab, column slab. Elections were coming, they put cladding on the exterior. State-of-the-art hospital. And you know, Mr. Speaker, we have to stop attempting to fool the people We have to stop it, because at some point those lies will catch up with each and every one of us. It will catch up with us, like the 23 islands. The 23 islands and the 680 on the gas. And the 680 on the gas. Banan's land. You know? So, bananas to France, bananas to Martinique. You know? You know? You know, so Mr. Speaker, I would have time to debate all of those things. I will have time to debate those things in another motion. Because when they speak either recklessly or untruths, at some point they will be called to account. And I rather suspect today is one of the days. Today is one of the days. So Mr. Speaker, when I hear a man say there are no revenue streams, a man who squandered our money, go and buy Caribbean Jewel Hotel when government is not a hotelier, go and compulsorily acquire swampland by the bridge. Next 2 days their brother-in-law is in DCA looking for approval for a hotel. That is the kind of things we have been faced with, Mr. Speaker. We did not need any new revenue stream for...
Mr. Speaker, Central, point of order, member
35 members impugning ill motives to me, okay, and making suggestions that I was corrupt, and I do not appreciate, Mr. Speaker, okay? The fact is, if in fact that there was any level of corruption, there's a process that he can take us through to do that. But you cannot continue to make innuendos.
What is the allegation of corruption?
The member said that I knew about land being purchased, and my brother-in-law the next day was there to purchase land for a hotel.
I didn't say purchase. I said compulsorily acquire.
Has nothing to do with one or the other, Mr. Speaker.
Okay, well, the 5 offices you rented from your father, that's not true.
Member of Castries Central.
Did they rent 5 offices before? How many offices did they rent before during the Labour Party administration?
Mr. Speaker, let me just, you know, Mr. Speaker, I can't believe it, you know. I cannot believe it. A man who took all the state resources to bring to Viewfort all government vehicles, all sorts of things, to bring to Viewfort to commemorate the opening of the horse race track, say that government didn't spend any money. Government did not spend any money. And if you were not there, I wanted to ask, who paid for the bypass road? Tell us, who paid for the bypass road? Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, let me just say this. You see, when persons have squandered the scarce resources of the state, hundreds of millions of dollars, and now they are talking about money to open hospital because there are no revenue streams. It tells you, Mr. Speaker, that the cavity where the brain ought to be in that person's head is empty. And so, Mr. Speaker, I will end here until the next motion, where I do believe the member for Miku South will be called upon to account. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Castries North.
Mr. Speaker, I'm obliged to speak on this motion because of the significance of the motion presented by the Prime Minister and Minister for Finance. Significant, Mr. Speaker, because not only is it a motion to deal with a healthcare institution, but rather the history behind that particular healthcare institution. a history, Mr. Speaker, which dates back to 1942. And for those who have followed the history of St. Jude, I'm sure will recall that St. Jude probably came about by mere accident. It was as a consequence of the British who had dispatched equipment and materials to build a hospital with the code name LAWN at the time, which happened to be Trinidad. But instead, somehow or the other, the code name got affected and turned out to be DAWN, D-A-W-N, landed in St. Lucia, and that facility started, only to find out halfway on that it was the wrong location, the wrong island, and of course the wrong location. It continued and was opened as a military hospital. The hospital was shut down, equipment taken away to Puerto Rico, and it was left abandoned down there. Left abandoned, grass, animals, probably horses too, and other animals occupied the spot. In a similar manner, Mr. Speaker, as they occupied St. Jude between 2011 and 2016, thereabout, not 2011, 2016 and 2019, when they abandoned it for absolutely no reason, Mr. Speaker. But Mr. Speaker, the other significance about this hospital, as it relates to what we are doing here today, is the foundation upon which the hospital was built. It was a foundation of charity. When the Sisters of the Sorrowful Mother, Sister Irma, who after years of abandonment and her own interest in the development of the institution, went into VF4 and decided it can be rebuilt, and the Sisters of the Sorrowful Mother out of Wisconsin decided that they will have a go at it. Mr. Speaker, it was developed and opened in 1962, and the basis for establishment was that they shall seek the support of the international community, particularly those in the United States from Wisconsin and those other states, in terms of financing the hospital. So it was about whatever contributions, donations from generous individuals, whatever services that professionals could have provided, doctors and nurses and healthcare providers provided, and also the people of this country who developed a culture of bartering for the services received for agricultural produce. That was the basis, Mr. Speaker, upon which St. Jude was built. However, St. Jude moved on from 1966, after it was opened, to 1992, when they decided that they had gone this far and needed to move on. And at that time, Mr. Speaker, I was the Minister for Health and had the task of determining the future of St. Jude after the Sisters of Sorrowful Mother departed and moved on. We were fortunate, Mr. Speaker, to visit Des Moines, Iowa, where the Sisters of Mercy from Mercy Hospital agreed that they will come in and take over from Sorrowful Mothers and continued the task moving forward. They did so. The government changed afterwards in 1997. The Labour administration came in, Mr. Speaker, and continued with the arrangement, the then arrangement with the Mercy Hospital, providing a range of services to the people of this country, Mr. Speaker. Services that were carried on merely on contributions, donations, voluntary support, and of course professionals who came in and provided seasonal service to the people of this country in medical, surgical, maternity, pediatrics, and the list went on, providing such great service to the people of St. Lucia. But Mr. Speaker, fast forward, having said this in 2010, about when the hospital burnt, immediately as the member for Dennery North indicated, we continued. We immediately set the motions in train, set into motion the act of reconstruction. The Labour Party came in, Mr. Speaker, and continued in that vein until 2016, when the then government, the new government, came in and took possession of the management of the affairs of this country. I will not dwell too much into what transpired for 3 years. 3 years of nothing happening, 3 years of abandonment, 3 years of what I consider to be mischief, 3 years of determination to try and destroy the legacy of those of us who started and who continued. 3 years of finding 3 years of an attempt to find ways and means to cause the people of this country, Mr. Speaker, to believe that what was going on was not in the interest of the people. What only happened, Mr. Speaker, in 2016, immediately after the election, there was an audit which was done under the guise of not having a report of what went on before. Under the guise of not having a report which was hidden and which was denied to the people of this country to know exactly what had transpired. They did what they called an audit, costing $1 million to the people of this country. $1 million. And I can say this bold because the one and only time I had the opportunity of acting as Prime Minister then for a few days was that occasion when a direct award came to me and I refused to sign it. I refused to sign it. I never heard again. I never felt. I never acted as Prime Minister since then, because I said, if anybody has any interest in the well-being of St. Lucia, you wouldn't do an audit and charge $1 million. Now the difference between then and now is that on this occasion, an audit was done. An audit was done on St. Jude. There was no charge. That's the difference. There was no charge. Those who offered their services did not charge the government of this country. And so, Mr. Speaker, the commitment and the dedication to complete St. Jude is real. It is not masquerading. It is not going out there and telling people that you cannot continue the hospital because a gurney cannot pass through the corridors. Mr. Speaker, a gurney doesn't have to pass through every corridor in any hospital. I went on Saturday, Mr. Speaker, after a long while. In fact, I refused to visit the hospital when it was under construction then, because I thought it was an aberration of the intent of a government to the people. When in 2016 you found a hospital in motion, just as the previous government had found it in 2011 and continued. You found it in motion. You deliberately stopped it to find reason or to try and create reasons for stopping it. I refused to visit at the time, Mr. Speaker, because I felt it would have been painful for me to realize what was stopped then. Well, I went on Saturday, quietly, and I was able to go through that hospital, Mr. Speaker. I was able to visit, to walk through, and to see what is going on. I'm speaking of the original St. Jude Hospital. And Mr. Speaker, it's amazing. Did you go to the box? I didn't go to the box. I didn't go to the box. I wouldn't go to the box. Because a hospital is not just aesthetics. The aesthetics that we are seeing there we call the box. is the cladding of a frame without anything inside of it. It has nothing. The old St. Jude building, what we all know as St. Jude, which has character, which has meaning, which has history, which has emotion and passion to all of us in St. Lucia. In there, Mr. Speaker, all of the gas lines are in. All, oxygen, you just name it, all the gas lines are in. Color-coded. Air conditioning in. There is equipment in there sitting, waiting to be activated. All of that is sitting in there, Mr. Speaker. Wide corridors. But of course, the intent at the time was to fool the people. Make the people believe that nothing had happened, that the corridors was narrow as one can ever imagine. And so that was the reason for moving. And you heard the previous speaker, Mr. Speaker, who said it started with the foundation. At a cost, estimated cost of $3 million, escalating to $9 million. From $3 to $9 million. So while, Mr. Speaker, the motion before us has nothing to do with what went on at St. Jude directly. But, Mr. Speaker, if what went on in the reconstruction of St. Jude is anything to be measured, then you understand the financial problems that St. Jude would have ended up itself with in its administration and operational expenses. That is the problem, Mr. Speaker. And I heard, Mr. Speaker, the member for Miku South talking about health insurance. Mr. Speaker, I have been in this business. In 1992, we started health insurance. We brought in a consultant financed by the Commonwealth, Commonwealth Secretariat. When we left, the Labour government came in and they proposed universal health care. In my view, it's another form of financing. I said health insurance, and the intention then, Mr. Speaker, was to build a parallel institution like a subsidiary to the National Insurance Corporation with an extra 1% placed on existing 5% deduction for national health, for national insurance, and that would have been the financing. So one from the contributor, one from employee, and one from the government, 3% to go to healthcare financing. The new administration decided we're going to go into something new, something more dynamic. Health, universal health coverage, build up your basket of services, your basket of health services, and then work out the mechanism for financing. No problem. In 2006, we came in and we said, let us look at it again, we can move on, let us deal with certain things, and let us take it a step at a time. What the member is talking about, the health insurance he's talking about, Mr. Speaker, has nothing to do with the state putting in place the infrastructure for health insurance, like we have national insurance, which is a provident fund system. What the member is talking about is an intention to create an avenue for private sector individuals to get into the system and to siphon money from the people and the country of this place. That is what it was. It is a private sector initiative. And I recall on many occasions, I see some of them hoovering around this morning because they smell blood. What the debate was about, Mr. Speaker, is how do we strengthen an existing institution which has been a success story in this country to allow it to be that institution to provide health care to our people. That was what it was about. But no, let us bring in people from the outside. Let us bring in private health insurance from overseas, and let us give them the monopoly. The monopoly that we started breaking down in 1979. The monopoly that people like Calix George broke down when it broke down cable and wireless and these people and said, open up the system, legalize, demonopolize the system. You're talking about health insurance and we will put it in the hands of the private sector, on the backs of the people of this country. But Mr. Speaker, we have seen the results already, and we'll hear about it. Already, within a few years, an initiative undertaken by the previous administration when it got into office in 2016 to abort the transition team from Victoria into OKEU, a transition team of competent and recognized and proven St. Lucians, put in place to transfer from Victoria Hospital into OKEU, aborted. Led by Stephen King, not Stevenson, Stephen. Led by Stephen King, well-known, passionate medical practitioner, abandoned it and did nothing. Okay? So you abandoned it, you did nothing, played games, and if it wasn't for COVID, and you heard them speaking about, we moved from Victoria Hospital and we went into OKEU and we built a respiratory hospital. Mr. Speaker, COVID chased them out of Victoria Hospital. That's what happened there. They were not ready to move into OKEU. They resisted moving into OKEU. They tried all kinds of things, Mr. Speaker. But when COVID came, they were on the back foot. Couldn't move. COVID chased them out of Victoria Hospital into OKEU, and that is how it happened. They were not ready for all of this, Mr. Speaker. Don't worry about all the talk. All the talk about what they did for COVID management. You heard them talking about a committee which was set up with the Cocolorum as the head, Mr. Speaker. You know, Mr. Speaker, you heard them talking about that committee, and that committee, what was it called again? I forgot the name they gave it, command center being set up. Mr. Speaker, that command center you heard, an aberration again. The command center was set up after the gentleman shut down the country without notice, Mr. Speaker, and then realized that he had a problem even when he was warned of the potential logistics that would affect him. Shutting down the country, he realized that he had to feed the people of this country, Mr. Speaker, and then said we needed to put some system in place because you shut down the entire country. The supermarkets are all closed. How are you going to collect food to distribute to people? And then thought that the gentleman who was in tourism was best suited to coordinate that effort of sourcing food by begging and going out there and sourcing food to distribute to people. That's how that command center came. And then they brought in the other officials. Mr. Speaker, a game, playing with the minds of this country. And so in the whole effort, Mr. Speaker, fast forward, eventually they're now operating OKEU. Without planning to go into OKEU. They were smoked out of Victoria Hospital. So they're in OKEU, and you need to get OKEU running efficiently. What did they do? They ran to Cayman City. They ran to Cayman City to give Cayman City the responsibility, the contract to manage OKEU. Many said, don't go there. Many said what operates in Cayman is not an example for St. Lucia. They went. And I believe we have a matter which we'll deal with at some stage to do with the cost incurred as a consequence of OKEU managing, not OKEU, Cayman City managing OKEU. The burden on the people of St. Lucia, $11 million US dollars, threatening to take this government to the international court, etc., etc. But this is the recklessness that occurred, Mr. Speaker, under that last administration. That's why I had to torpedo them. And you heard it talking about dead weight. I torpedoed them. the nonsense that was going. And some of them who now posturing, etc., etc., they complain too, you know. They complain too.
But they come in from the back door.
They were catching there, and they complain. So, Mr. Speaker, the point I'm making, Mr. Speaker, is a kind of reckless leadership that went on. A kind of leadership that didn't care about anyone. That's why they could have stood up on the boulevard and say, let the jackasses bray, because they believed that they had inherited the position and no one else can take it away from them. Well, we took it away from them. We must not allow it to happen. So, Mr. Speaker, that's the burden that was thrust on us. That's the burden that was thrust on us. And today you stand here and you're asking, how will we be able to generate revenue for the management and the cost of the operations of the health sector? Mr. Speaker, when the VAT rate was reduced by 2.5% to 12.5%, the country lost about $76 million a year. 76, Mr. Speaker. Had we not lost $76 million, Mr. Speaker, we would have been able to fund the hospital and the healthcare system.
That's correct.
Probably we would not have been here today. So you make those reckless statements, you come here posturing, posturing as if you are the guru in finance and economics and management, etc., etc. In your private life, they never gave you anything to manage. But you here today making it appear that you know what it is to manage. Mr. Speaker, if ever I had an opportunity to make a decision in the interest of St. Lucia, in a capacity called that of the position of Prime Minister, I would not have recklessly given $7 million to someone and say, bring vaccines to me. Not when the World Health Organization is there waiting for us to help us. Not when the US is there trying to help us and all these other organizations, all these other countries waiting. But it is the recklessness. So if at the time, without any analysis being done on your revenues, your income streams, the value of the VAT to the country, if only that analysis was done at the time, Mr. Speaker, and to understand that you'd have lost $76 million, and that $76 million would have helped you in the management of the OKEU and assist St. Jude, you would not have taken that decision. And so, Mr. Speaker, this resolution is quite important. It is important to demonstrate the commitment and the determination of this government to move on with the healthcare services of this country. And I must admit, Mr. Speaker, I was very proud of the Minister for Health today. At one point I say he's speaking health now, because he delivered with confidence and with authority. And one of the things he said there, and obviously misunderstood, I don't believe it was just mere mischief. It was probably misunderstood. What the Minister for Health said, he made a very important point, Mr. Speaker. He said that the Miku Health Center will now be more or less classified as a center of excellence. A center of excellence. And then went on to state the other health centers which will also receive that kind of recognition. A center of excellence in, I can't remember what area you said, maternal health, etc., etc. What exactly that means, Mr. Speaker, is that in setting up those centers of excellence, you're not saying that that health center will only deal with maternal health. You're not saying that's what it's going to be, Mr. Speaker. It will have a devoted focus on maternal health, but it will provide all of the other services, community primary health care services around that. course. But you don't even, I mean, come on. So, to try and ridicule the minister for having said this is a wonderful initiative. So you have maternal health in Miku. You probably have another area, another sector in another health center, and so that your health services is balanced. And then you have your primary, your secondary health services. But Mr. Speaker, when you listen to them on the other side, you'd believe that healthcare is about hospitals. Mr. Speaker, healthcare is not about huge hospitals. It's not about building huge hospitals, Mr. Speaker. It's about having a sound primary healthcare system in your country at the community level. That is what it is. The foundation of your health is how well you can get your people to remain healthy and stay away from the hospital.
Very good.
That is what it is at the community level.
Good point.
So when we speak of having 34 health centers within a radius of 1 mile per community, it means that within 1 mile of every community, you can respond to basic health needs at the primary health care level. These are the systems, the different tiers of health. So health centers, then you have polyclinics, and then you go into the secondary health care, and maybe tertiary health service, where you have the state-of-the-art health hospitals, which you can probably allow private sector to go in. So, Mr. Speaker, it's a lot of blage, as we say, a lot of talk, no action. So it's all about, a mentor of mine used to say, sweet talk and fancy chalk. That's what it is about, sweet talk and fancy chalk. So they come, and my leader here will say, flashing mirrors, zegling you, flashing mirrors. They come and they present all kinds of renderings and tell you, we're going to have 25 or 26 islands in the Pearl of the Caribbean. Now, the Pearl of the Caribbean is really the Virgin Islands, for those of you who don't know. So they tell you're going to have the Pearl of the Caribbean with 26 or 28 islands. I cannot remember, because by the time that was attacked, the next day they didn't have any islands involved. By the time we spoke about building a causeway to the islet, they said, no, we're not building a causeway. So, Mr. Speaker, this resolution, Mr. Speaker, is truly important to the people of this country. It is important to show our commitment to the development of health, not the talk, the action, responding in a timely way to the needs of our health sector. And so, Mr. Speaker, I believe, having known St. Jude Hospital, having studied St. Jude Hospital, the history, the people who came, Sister Irma and the Sisters of the Sorrowful Mother, and all of those persons who came, the doctors who came occasionally during the summer, etc., during the winter to provide services, the people who went and received state-of-the-art quality services and came bearing fruits for St. Jude, whatever it is, whether it's fish or ground provisions or fruits. And that is why the restaurant at St. Jude Hospital was one that people enjoyed going to, because they're able, as a consequence of the battle which took place, as they brought the food, they utilized it and were able to sell it, and persons would come and have a decent meal. The revenue was coming in, and so they were able to finance the hospital. So, Mr. Speaker, I support this resolution 100%. And I do look forward to its passage, and I do look forward to the progress at St. Jude. And I think very soon, sooner than later, they will see St. Jude reopening its doors at the very site where it started, down at Beanfield. I thank you.
Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I just want to, there is a book called The Measure of a Man. It's by Sidney Potter. And then I listened to the member for Castries North and the former Prime Minister, and I saw the measure of a man. Here is a man who can come in his honorable house and say to the public of St. Lucia that that direction was wrong. It was going wrong. He did not remain there and complain internally and bicker and bad talk and side talk and pretend that he was dissatisfied, but he was staying there because he wanted to do something. He thought about it, his conscience, and his understanding of good over evil, and his understanding of the structures in this society that would cause people to believe that they are superior to other people and they have a right to govern. He saw it and he said, I can't take it anymore, and he left it, Mr. Speaker. And that is the measure of a man. And I want to compliment, I've never told him that before, and I'm sure my colleagues agree, I want to compliment the member for Castries North for having the courage, Mr. Speaker, to understand that what was happening in St. Lucia was bad. It was wrong. And you know, Mr. Speaker, I listened to the member for Miku South. And Mr. Speaker, you know, flashing mirrors. Mr. Speaker, you know, sometimes I say to myself, if that member keeps quiet, things would be better. Because no one here intended to speak, you know. Because we know St. Jude is something we have to do. No one didn't speak. We come, do our thing and go. The member for Choiseul, you know, he had to try things. So you know, but I've told him already that there is space for him. Because I know that he doesn't agree with what's happening. He can never, I know this gentleman, a professional banker, he could never agree fully with what happened in the last 5. Never. His heart can't. Mr. Speaker, he must have the courage. He must have the measure of a man. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to tell him 2 things. He spoke about the highway. If his Prime Minister did not stop the growth of the highway would have been quitted by now, would have been finished now, if he didn't stop it. Number 2, the management accounts. St. Jude Hospital, they have a system of management accounts that they do every month. But good observation. So that's upcoming. Number 3, the ambulance service. I have some good news for you, but you'll hear it with time. Now let's get to the flashing mirrors, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, there is no document that the Minister of Health has seen, and I've asked him, that has anything definitive about health insurance. There is no document that the Minister of Health has seen. Right, exactly. I remember when the press asked the member from Miku South about the white paper health insurance, he rubbished her. I remember that. Rubbished her. No paper. So the health insurance, not any paper. And if I'm a humble guy, I'll apologize.
We're just discussing it. Right?
Never. But in 2016, when he came into power, or even from as far as 2006, 2011, when he came to government, we had a complete analysis of universal health care. Complete. There were documents on universal health care. There was costing, there was how it, but as usual, you all just abandon it. Further, we had started the universal health care business when we gave diabetes and hypertension medication free to the people of St. Lucia as the start of a basket of goods towards universal health care. So again, flashing mirrors. But Mr. Speaker, I want to say something that's very personal to me. Both of my parents died from non-communicable diseases. So it is in my DNA that I may be a victim of non-communicable diseases. So I decided that I would have the self-discipline to change my diet completely, to exercise, and to get myself in a situation where my risks will have been minimized. The party that he led, they ridiculed me. They said I was sick. And I remember, you know, when people do things in politics, Mr. Speaker, they must understand that the future, because that thing revolves, Mr. Speaker. When you sit and you behave as if the country belongs to you, I was on both sides. I understand it. I've never changed. I still live the same place I live, even though your chance to have a house in Kappa State. I've never changed. I've remained grounded, Mr. Speaker. There was a meeting in Bocage, and a 40-seater carrying people stopped in front of the meeting. I was speaking, so I held my mic and I stopped speaking. The next day, someone posted on social media, "Can this man lead you? He is sick. Look at him, he couldn't continue conversation because he's sick and he was about to faint." Nobody in the United States Party ever said, "Do not say that." They sat there, Mr. Speaker, and they allowed it to happen. In fact, it was planned to tell the world that I was sick. But God helped me, Mr. Speaker. Up to now, my health is okay, and I thank him for that. But that was to teach people by example that you have to exercise. You have to change your diet. You have to lose weight, Mr. Speaker. And now, you see how I can butt my coat? Mr. Speaker, that is talking about, when he speaks about flashing mirrors, about high blood pressure, as if something that he cared about, Mr. Speaker. But let's go further. Mr. Speaker, the member for Vieux-Fort South says that not 1 cent of solution money was spent on DSH. Mico South. What? Not 1 cent of DSH money was spent on Mico South. Mr. Speaker, you know how much money that this Minister of Finance spent on DSH up to now? $63.6 million. $63.6 million was spent by taxpayers on the DSH project, minus the fact of the land, part of the land that was sold for $1 square foot. What? Lease, yeah. Let me tell you the total $63.6 million that was spent by this government on DSH. The new road to Larissus, $15.6 million, direct award, one company. But you know, every study, not done by locals, by international consultants, have said that that road was built only for the DSH project. Only. $15.6 million. Purchase of lands at Voley to displace the farmers, $11 million. Relocation of the landfill, $17 million. And I'm going to check it. Basic arithmetic. 15.6. Somebody check it for me. 11 and 17. Infrastructure work at the agricultural station at Voley, $7 million. Volet, $7 million. Payment to farmers, and the member for Vieux-Fort South was instrumental because they wanted to kick the people out. Huh? Yeah? $1 million. Payment, Mr. Speaker. Hurtful, I understand that. $1 million. outstanding payment for the processing plant, $12 million. And up to now, DSH, they have not paid. What? The meat processing plant, they had to move. We had to move. So, and they were supposed to pay $12 million. Total $63.6 million. And we missed not coming more. Yeah, we have more. When you see he comes and he postures and evidence and everything, time. The same way he said, he told his colleagues, I could never win. This guy said never win. Look at where he is today. Time is the great healer. Time is the speaker. So 63. Mr. Speaker, lots more, but time, and counting, Mr. Speaker. Then, Mr. Speaker, the broadcast rights for the horse race, we had to pay for it. Yes. The government should pay for the horse race that they had in Viewfort. We paid for the broadcasting rights. The government of St. Lucia. They bought some incinerators or whatever they call it to burn rubbish. These things still up there, non-functional, and you had to pay to carry garbage from Viewfort to Castries for DSH. How much money a month? 76,000, and that's not even there. And the money you paid for the incinerators, they are still there. Can't work, non-functional, and you paid $76,000 a month to carry garbage from Viewfort to Castries because of DSH. But not a cent of St. Lucia taxpayers' money spent in DSH.
Even they show $1 million on the day of the race.
You had to pay for all the people. You had to pay. You had to pay $1 million for the show you had there when you make people wear big yellow hats and things so. You had to pay for it. You understand? For the yellow hat thing on there. One horse race. $1 million, Mr. Speaker. So when you see he comes and says not 1 cent of St. Lucia money, but how could we could have money for health care? If you spend $63 million for a dream, $63 million for a dream, Mr. Speaker, and the DSH project, that story has not been told, and I've held my silence. I've been silent about it, Mr. Speaker, because there's a lot more on that DSH project, Mr. Speaker. So, $63 million is spent on DSH. And he said not a cent of St. Lucian money was spent on DSH, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, let's get to the St. Jude Hospital, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, do you know, there is not one document that the member from Miku South can show, not one document that says that the original building could not serve as a hospital. There's not one document. Just talk. Let me tell you what the document that he paid for said about the original buildings. It said, apart from thing, it said, however, we do see a great value present in the works completed to date and believe that the project is salvageable and could be converted into a facility that can properly serve the needs of St. Lucia. That is the only document. That is the only document that exists that says anything about a building. He cannot show one document, not one, not a sentence, that says that the original buildings could not be used as a hospital, Mr. Speaker. But let's go further. Mr. Speaker, do you know that in the box, Mr. Speaker, apart from what the member for Castries Center speaks about, the $70 million direct award, you know, Mr. Speaker, the box has no roof. You want to believe that? You say a hospital is 70% complete and you have no roof on it? You know, right now, we have to employ a contractor to cause a roof to happen on that building, to preserve it, because when it rains, all the cladding that they put for bluff on it gets destroyed. The building has to be sealed. You know, right now, we may have to spend on the box in excess of $20 million just to protect it from the atmosphere, and you tell people that was 70% complete. Do you know, Mr. Speaker? Do you know, Mr. Speaker, that Mr. Speaker, this is painful. What happened at St. Jude is painful. It's really painful. Mr. Speaker, there was a private investor in St. Lucia who brought in an MRI machine. And he invited me, the Minister for Health was there, the member for Viewfort South was there, to the opening of the MRI machine. I met a gentleman at that opening. He didn't know me. He says to me, who are you? I said, I always introduce myself as Philip J. Pierre. He said, are you the Prime Minister? I said, yes, for now. He said to me, your government has a lot of money. I said, my government has a lot of money. He says, I have in my bank account $1.8 million for equipment for St. Jude Hospital. $1.8 million. I didn't ask him at the USAC. I didn't see. $1.8 million, Mr. Speaker. And he said to me, when he heard that the government was not completing the hospital, he saw absolutely no reason for that to happen, Mr. Speaker. So he has that money holding, and when we're ready, we can come for it. I said to the Minister of Health, the Minister of Health had a meeting with him, and he'll be able to use that $1.8 million. Do you know, Mr. Speaker, that there was equipment, there were windows, there were tiles, even there were beds, there was a whole theater in containers to complete that hospital. And this gentleman, that member from Microsoft, he left it there while he's just looking for corruption and saying that we get involved. He left it. It is rotten, Mr. Speaker. It's millions of dollars of equipment for St. Jude Hospital are in containers as we speak. And you talk about health care? And you talk about the South? Millions. Let me tell you something. To make sure that we did it right, the person who did the inventory was the guy who was working. We haven't changed one member there, We haven't done like you all. We kept them there. The person who did the inventory was the one who was supervising. He's the one. There are reams of information on equipment that you paid for. I talk about health care and wasting money, and you come in and you post him, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, when it is this government, that member from Microsoft, is his habit of stopping projects. His habit, Mr. Speaker. His habit. Mr. Speaker, Castle Grocery Highway, the airport, St. Jude, Mr. Speaker. And he comes and speaks about DVRP. It was the member for Viewfort South, when I was Prime Minister, when I was Minister for Infrastructure, and he was member for Ministry of Economic Development.
The largest DVRP project was under Labour. The largest DVRP. So we were the ones, when he talks about working with the World Bank to get the DVRP project going, the largest DVRP project was under Labour, initiated by this Minister of Finance. The largest DVRP project. When he comes and he speaks about, and that happened in late 2015 or early 2016. And the election came in 2016. So how could we do anything? How could we? So when he comes and talks about we left DVRP because he negotiated the World Bank, that's not true. Absolutely not true. Thank you, sir. Absolutely not true. A complete fabrication. But let me tell you something about DVRP. The World Bank, they have a special, their situation is they must be tendering. Again, I want to go back to the past. We had a meeting with the World Bank. A lady, Alison Jean was was Minister of Infrastructure. When we spoke about to the World Bank about the tendering processes, PSCs. Because the Minister of Finance and I had discussions about how these tendering processes seem to take too long. So the Minister of Finance initiated the discussion, and the PS and myself held the discussion. And the World Bank waived some of the tendering procedures, still with accountability to allow small contractors to get tendering. You can remember that, Mr. You can remember that. We did that. So then, let me tell you what he did. You know, he took taxpayers' money to pay consultancy fees so that they could give direct awards for consultancy fees. Let me say it again. Instead of continuing with the revised tendering processes that we had negotiated, when you approach the World Bank says no. Any of our projects must go through tendering, even if it's tendering that is modified for small contractors. He said, no, I don't want that. I do not want that. He said, I will pay it myself. The World Bank said, if you pay your own money, do what you want. So all the consultancies, remember for Castry South, was done by direct award, which we paid. Rather than World Bank paying. Yes. And the total money, I'm not sure, but I can get the information this afternoon. And the total consultancies paid was nearly, and the member for Answer will probably be able to help me on that, was between 50 and possibly $75 million. Million. Which could have been paid by the World Bank. But because he wanted to do it by direct award, he removed it from the tendering process and left it with direct award so he can give friends. And when my daughter gets a job for $6,000 a month, you have a big show. Friends, family, and friends, what? You know, big show. Yes. He did it by direct award, Mr. Speaker. So he removed it from the World Bank, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, then he speaks about commissioning of hospital. When the member for Microsoft became Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker, there was a transition team led by Dr. Stephen King and medical people in St. Lucia, being helped by the French. We had set up MOUs where the French had given us equipment for the new hospital, everything had set up, Mr. Speaker. When he came into government, he fired Stephen King and kept the OKU closed. And you talk about health care, kept the OKU closed, Mr. Speaker. And when COVID hit, Mr. Speaker, he was forced to use the same solutions to commission OKU. And then he went, and I'm sorry that the member for Kashi Central and the member for Mikundov gave them advance notice.
But that's how we are, transparent. Next week, we will come and tell the story of Cayman City. Next week. Not long ago. Not long. Next week, Tuesday. Not too long. So when you see that this posturing, taking the cut and things, that is just the words of a coward. Want to create his own mirage, so when the truth comes, he'll run like a spoiled child, take his ball and go outside and go on a favorite TV show and say things. Mr. Speaker, talking about getting together for health, the member for Beaufort South, when he was Prime Minister, he asked for a committee to be formed to deal with health care. Occupy the house with healthcare and healthcare financing. The United Workers' Party refused to allow the member for Miku North to be part of that, for Castries North to be part of that committee. Refused, Mr. Speaker. They told him, don't get involved. And you're speaking about healthcare? When we were in opposition, the member again for Beaufort South sat here and he said, let us form a house committee again for healthcare. He ignored us. Let the jackasses breathe. He ignored us. And I talk about healthcare and we want to do about things for the South, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker. Then he speaks about that is a bandage. A band-aid, Mr. Speaker. But you know, it is better to have a band-aid than to let the sore get worse. And if he was in government, the health care of St. Lucia would not even be able to take a band-aid. Because absolutely no plans. Just talk. Home potting in the South. There is not one study that can give any definitive statement on home cooking for the South. One. Exactly. Just talk. The guy just stands there and just say things. Not one. There is not one study that says anything about any home potting for the south of the country. Then you speak about we made a plan with GP8 to stop any development in the south. I mean, what kind of... Mr. Speaker, this motion, Mr. Speaker, is to give much needed support to St. Jude. This year, our subvention to St. Jude was $19.7 million for recurrent expenditure and $1.5 million for current expenditure to help in some retrofitting works, Mr. Speaker. But the work is continuing, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased that the conditions at St. Jude have not got worse. They have not got worse, Mr. Speaker. But it's a work in progress. And one difference between what's happening now and what happened before is right now, the staff, the board of directors of St. Jude are fully involved in what is happening, the construction is happening now in the original facility. The staff and the board are fully involved, Mr. Speaker. Are fully involved. Because we are not the experts. They are the experts. We are fully involved. So we just go, you don't stand up and talk. We base our decisions on evidence, Mr. Speaker, the same way we did it for the St. Jude, the same way we did it for the airport, the same way we'll do it with Mr. Lindquist. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable members, the question is that Parliament authorizes the Minister for Finance to guarantee an overdraft facility in the amount of EC $3.5 million from the Republic Bank Eastern Caribbean Limited to the St. Jude Hospital for the purpose of assisting with working capital requirements. Be it further resolved that A, the repayment of the advances are on demand. B, the interest is payable monthly at the bank's base lending rate from time to time less 4% per annum, with a present effective rate of 6% per annum. C, a commitment fee of $5,000 is payable on acceptance of the commitment letter. I now put the question. As many as of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Leader of Government Business.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I beg that this House stands suspended until 2:30.
Honourable members, the question is that this House to stand suspended until 2:30 p.m. I now put the question. As many as of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Sitting suspended.
All right.
Sitting until 2:30 so as to have a lunch break. This morning, before the House was the motion that Parliament authorized the Minister of Finance to guarantee an overdraft facility in the amount of EC $3,500,000 from the Republic Bank Eastern Caribbean Limited to the St. Jude Hospital for the purpose of assisting with working capital requirements. Making contributions this morning was the Minister for Health, the Minister for Education, that is the member for the Vieux-Fort North and the member for Dennery North, also the member for Castries Central and the member for Castries North. All made contributions with the Prime Minister summing up. But before we go to break, just an observation. The Leader of the Opposition complains of lack of protection afforded him by the Speaker. But I must say, it must be noted that the Leader of the Opposition often interrupts other speakers in this chamber, most times, because he's absent most of the other when other speakers are making their contributions. He is especially absent when the member for Castries Central, the member for Castries North, and the member for Castries South are on their feet, as was evident again this morning. Just an observation. Just an observation. So we'll be back here at 2:30. When we come back, we will be discussing or debating, the House will be debating the amendment, the Constitution Amendment number 2, and that is for a Deputy Speaker. Until such time, back to Master Control.